On my birthday, which was also our 15th wedding anniversary, my husband Robert came home with his mistress Kelly and their secret child Alice. "I want to divorce you and live together with Kelly and Alice. I've already lived with you for 15 years, that's long enough," he declared, expressing his desire to cherish his mistress and their hidden daughter from now on. I was so shocked by this sudden turn of events that I couldn't gather my thoughts. Above all, I thought it was the worst that Robert didn't even seem the least bit remorseful about having an affair. The other woman was also brazenly fantasizing about living in this house as if it was her own. "When I live here, I'm going to buy that sofa the famous actress recommended," she exclaimed as the carefree conversation progressed on its own, until it was stopped by my daughter Rebecca. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, her single sentence bringing Robert and Kelly's chatter to an abrupt halt. And with the next words Rebecca uttered, the situation began to change. "My name is Sarah. And I'm currently a 40-year-old housewife. My husband Robert is the picture of perfection. He's found success in his work as an education commentator, earning an annual salary of $200,000, and he devotedly engages in childcare as a father on his days off. He always greets the neighbors, and whenever I go grocery shopping at the supermarket, people tell me how envious they are of me. The neighbors told me again today how jealous they are. Someone saw you cleaning up the signboard that blew over in the wind this morning and thanked you, saying it was a big help," I mentioned. "Wow, someone saw me? Well, contributing to the community you live in is only natural. Robert takes the initiative in contributing to the local area, and no matter where you look, you can't find a single flaw in him. I felt blessed every day to be married to such a husband." And Rebecca has also inherited her father's intelligence. She receives daily tutoring from her dad and consistently ranks at the top of her class in her high-level high school. Apparently, her dream is to become a lawyer, so she makes it a daily habit to read the news in newspapers. "If this news story went to trial, I wonder what kind of verdict would be handed down," she mused, pulling out a law book to investigate. "You're amazing, doing this day after day. If it were me, I'd find the research too much work and put it off," I admitted. "It is a lot of work, but I'm learning so much. Once I figure it out, I'll teach you too, Mom." Both Robert and Rebecca are extremely bright, so as the only average housewife, I felt a bit of impatience at times. "Living with you two sometimes makes me feel inferior, like I have no redeeming qualities. Maybe I should study something too." "Really? I actually think you're more amazing than me, Mom," Rebecca countered, and we passed the days in trivial everyday chatter like that. Then one day, Robert brought this up. "Come to think of it, Sarah's 40th birthday is coming up soon. What should we do this year? I'll go buy a cake." "Oh, then I'll make dinner that night." Robert and Rebecca were suggesting ways to celebrate my birthday. "Thank you, just the thought alone makes me happy," I expressed my gratitude, getting excited for my birthday. That's when Robert suddenly changed the subject. "Sarah's 40th birthday is one thing, but it's also the day of our 15th wedding anniversary," he pointed out. "Oh wow, 15 years is a milestone anniversary, isn't it?" That's right, we had gotten married on my birthday. Since my birthday and our anniversary overlapped every year, he had always prioritized celebrating my birthday. Even though we never celebrated our anniversary, Robert still remembered it. "You remembered?" I choked up with joy from the morning. "Well, look forward to the big day. I'm not good with surprises, but maybe I'll make an effort for you and Rebecca," he said, which made me so excited for my own birthday. Then a few days later, on my actual birthday, Robert and Rebecca were up preparing from the morning, making dinner and going out to buy a cake. Since it was my birthday, they told me I could go shopping or relax in my room, whatever I wanted to do. It was a rare day where I didn't have to do housework, so I enjoyed shopping until the evening. When Robert arrived home, Rebecca had prepared an extravagant dinner. I bought a few pre-made dishes, but I worked hard on stuff like the potato salad. Oh, I don't mind at all. I'm just happy you've been preparing this since morning. By the way, where's your dad? I had thought Robert was helping Rebecca prepare everything, but he was nowhere to be seen. Oh, right after you left this morning, Dad went out to buy a cake. There are plenty of bakeries near our house. And yet, he had been gone since morning without returning until evening, so we started to worry. When I called him, Robert said he would be back soon. There was background noise on the phone, and it sounded like he was in the car. Oh, Robert, I wonder if he went all the way to a distant shop to buy it for me? Maybe. Remember when you saw that cake on TV and said it looked delicious? He might have gone to get that one. We eagerly awaited Robert's return with the delicious cake. 30 minutes later, Robert came home carrying a cake box. Sorry I'm late. I bought Sarah's favorite cake, so put it in the fridge, okay? Now, let's eat the dinner Rebecca prepared first. Yay! I'm starving, let's dig in. Laughing at their exchange, I took the cake Robert handed me and carried it to the kitchen. Huh! Glancing at the cake box, I was surprised. The sticker on the box indicated it was from a shop just a 10-minute walk from our house. I felt a bit embarrassed, having assumed he had driven far in the morning just to buy a cake for me. The cake was likely just a side errand while he was out taking care of other things he wanted to get done on his day off. After finishing our meal and having some cake, Robert cleared his throat and said, "There's something I need to talk to you two about. Can you wait here a moment?" Sure. Rebecca and I exchanged glances, wondering what this could be about. Wait, maybe it's a surprise gift for your 15th wedding anniversary? When she said that, I thought she might be right. Rather than cake, he had probably gone out of his way to buy a present. Rebecca nudged my arm with a grin. I'm so jealous. What do you think the present will be? Knowing Dad, maybe a designer handbag or something? Rebecca and I waited for Robert with growing anticipation. Then 10 minutes later, Robert returned. As the living room door opened, the eager looks on my and Rebecca's faces changed in an instant. What? Behind Robert stood an unfamiliar woman and child. The woman looked to be in her 20s, wearing a miniskirt, and the elementary school-aged child had a flashy hairstyle. Their appearance was so different from our family that I felt a bit unnerved. Who are these people? When I asked, Robert revealed a shocking truth. Actually, this child is mine. What? Rebecca and I cried out in disbelief. We never imagined he would do something like this, so the shock was tremendous. As I stood there dumbfounded, Robert continued. Sarah and I have lived together for 15 years now. And Rebecca, you're in high school and almost an adult. You two are proper grown-ups now, right? Robert started creating a strangely sentimental atmosphere. Still unable to process the situation, my gaze darted back and forth between Robert and the woman half hidden behind him. But this child is still little and she hasn't been able to live together with us. She's had to sneak around, never going out freely. So for their sake, I want you and Rebecca to move out. Robert was telling me and Rebecca to leave this precious home we had lived in for so long. This was the house Robert and I had bought together, nervously but excitedly, as newlyweds. He tells me to hand over those memories to his lover. What's more, the reason was that he hadn't spent much time with my mistress and illegitimate child, which was extremely harsh, and the sudden turn of events made me reconsider my thoughts. Wait a minute! What Robert's saying true? Is that child really yours? I doubted it was a lie, as the child looked too different from Rebecca. Yeah, it's true. This child's name is Alice, and unlike Rebecca, she's a very energetic and bright. Right, Kelly? Yes. I've been hearing from Robert that Rebecca is a quiet and smart girl. So I was happy that Alice has a completely different personality from Rebecca. Kelly looked at me and smiled with a sneer. I felt unpleasant about the conversation between Robert and Kelly. When I thought about how Robert was playing around with this woman while I was doing housework and taking care of Rebecca, I felt sick to my stomach. Mom, are you okay? Seeing my face turning pale, Rebecca gently rubbed my back. Usually, Robert would have sensed that I was feeling unwell. But with another woman around, he doesn't seem to care about me at all. He keeps looking at Kelly and Alice. This is the house we're going to live in from now on. We'll give the sofa and TV to Sarah and Rebecca, so let's buy new ones for us. Yay, I'm so happy. I definitely want the sofa that famous celebrity was recommending. They were already moving the conversation forward on their own, even though I hadn't said I would give them the house yet. There's no way I'm giving up this house for his mistress. The conversation is moving forward on its own as if it's already been decided, but I don't want to give up this house. Just get out already. When I shouted loudly, the room fell silent. Then Robert sighed and spoke to me in an exasperated tone, as if to admonish me. You know what? This house is standing because of the money I earn, right? So all the authority lies with me. This house is where my family will live from today, so you outsiders need to leave, okay? The usually kind and gentle Robert spoke in a cruel and terrible way, as if revealing his true nature. Then, with a sneer, he said one last thing. We're getting divorced today. Sarah, you're 40 years old. It's been 15 years since we got married, so it's a good time. I'll properly pay child support until Rebecca becomes an adult. You can rest assured about that. Rather, he probably thinks that because he has money, if he says he'll pay, I'll agree. I felt frustrated realizing how much Robert had been looking down on me. What are you saying? Amidst all this, Rebecca said that in a calm and low voice. Huh? What's wrong? Are you sad about being separated from Daddy? Don't worry. Daddy won't forget about you even if we're apart. That's not it. Dad, you can't divorce Mom, you know? At Rebecca's words, the room was in an uproar. Huh? What's with this kid? Aren't you just jealous because we're going to be happy? Now, Kelly, calm down. Rebecca, why did you think that? Robert asked Rebecca that question with a deliberately exaggerated smile. Then, with Rebecca's further words, the situation changed drastically. Because that's how it normally is. Huh? I don't know about that, and aren't you just saying that to threaten me? Kelly started to get suspicious about what was going on. I don't know the details either, but looking at Rebecca's usual demeanor, I can tell she's not lying. Robert also knows Rebecca well, so he swallowed hard upon hearing those words. It's been decided that it's impossible for the person who cheated to demand a divorce. That's why Dad can't say he wants to divorce. As I listened to Rebecca's story, I realized she was right. That might be true. As I said that, Kelly's voice suddenly rose. Then why don't you guys say you want a divorce? Give Robert to us. Kelly confronted me like that. Can I trust Robert who cheated on me and rebuild a warm family again? But I also didn't want to give in to Kelly's demands and hand Robert over. As I was at a loss for words, confronted by Kelly, Rebecca came to my aid. So what do you want to do, Dad? Well, of course I want to live with Kelly and Alice from now on. You're almost an adult, so you'll be fine living with just Sarah, right? After hearing Robert's opinion, Rebecca calmly stated, "So even if this child causes you to lose your job, you still want to live with them? What?" Everyone present was confused by Rebecca's words. Pointing at Alice, who was hiding behind Kelly, Rebecca continued, "This kid goes to Franklin Elementary School, doesn't she? How do you know that?" "It's on the way to my high school. I heard that kid is always causing trouble in the nearby park and getting scolded by the police and teachers. Even at my school, there are rumors that the students from that elementary school are rough. Do you really want to make her your daughter, Dad? Even at the cost of your reputation as an education critic?" Rebecca declared. Upon hearing this, Robert whirled around to face Kelly and Alice, demanding, "Is what Rebecca is saying true? Alice, have you been doing those things?" Alice trembled, hiding behind Kelly. Realizing he wasn't getting anywhere, Robert turned to Kelly. "If the police and teachers are involved, the guardians must know too. Kelly, is it true?" Sweating under Robert's intense gaze, Kelly avoided eye contact. "That's just how elementary school kids are. You're making too big a deal out of it." While she didn't explicitly confirm it, her response was as good as an admission. Robert began to fret. He was likely imagining what life would be like after marrying Kelly and Alice. His reputation as an education critic would suffer, and he'd undoubtedly face backlash. The once supremely confident Robert was gone. Distraught, he seemed to be feeling anxious about the future. No! Because of this kid, this is the worst." But Rebecca apparently still had more to say, relentlessly pressing on. "And Mom, doesn't this woman's face look familiar?" "Huh?" Kelly and I looked at each other, but nothing came to mind. Kelly also seemed clueless. "A month ago, on the way back from shopping in town, there was a woman in a red dress." "Ah, I remember. We bumped into a woman in a red dress and she yelled at us furiously even though it was both our faults. The cake we bought got smashed too. It was awful, but why bring that up now?" When I asked, Rebecca smirked and pointed at Kelly. "That woman was her, wasn't it?" Hearing this, Kelly began to panic. "Huh? I don't remember something that long ago. And what does that have to do with anything now anyway? Don't try to change the subject." Kelly was visibly flustered. She must have something she wants to hide. Desperately recalling the details of that day, I shouted the words that would send Kelly to hell. "Oh, right. You were with a man other than Robert at that time." "Shut up!" Kelly hurriedly tried to stop me, but it was too late. Upon hearing this, Robert immediately fixed his gaze on Kelly. "What? You were cheating?" "No, that was just a coincidence." "And who are you to talk when you're the one cheating? This is the worst. Why is this happening to me?" Kelly flew into a panic at the sudden revelation. This only seemed to further enrage Robert. "My position is completely different from yours, Kelly. It's not like you can just go around cheating too. And with a kid. How could you? And a month ago, we had already decided to get married, hadn't we?" Robert confronted her aggressively as their argument escalated more and more out of control. Half crazed, they continued their absurd bickering. I was left behind with Rebecca, listening to the two of them arguing incessantly. It had become so ridiculous that I finally decided to intervene. "Oh, enough already. Can we just stop this right here? Robert, you're the last person who should be telling someone not to cheat." I put an end to their foolish and disgraceful bickering. You say that we have this life because of you. How dare you use those words? At the very least, the reason you've been able to focus on your work is that I've been maintaining our lifestyle. It's not thanks to just one person, it's thanks to our family. And you call yourself an education critic? What a joke! I scoffed, throwing sarcastic jabs at Robert. And Kelly, I'm sorry, but did I stir up some unnecessary memories for you? I'm sure this child isn't related to Robert by blood either. You seem to want to marry a wealthy man, but now that it's turned out like this, I pity you. You have my deepest sympathies. I mocked Kelly with a disparaging tone. The two of them were beside themselves, their plans having gone completely awry. Ugh! This is an absolute disaster. Everything is ruined. Kelly tugged at her hair, unable to hide her frustration, perhaps realizing that she wouldn't be able to marry Robert after all. What? This is the worst. I was going to marry you and provide for you, but forget it. Get out of here, now. Robert was just as agitated as Kelly, upset that things hadn't worked out for him either. You think I'd ever come back to a place like this? Alice! We're leaving! Kelly had shown up out of nowhere, demanding that I divorce Robert, but of course, it didn't go as smoothly as she'd hoped. To make matters worse, her own affair had been exposed. The moment things turned against her, she tried to run away. My birthday and our 15th wedding anniversary were coming to the most disastrous end imaginable. But I wasn't about to let it end like that. I lightly tapped Kelly on the shoulder as she attempted to flee, and said, "What makes you think you can just leave? You were having an affair with a married man, so I'll be seeking compensation from you." What? That's impossible. I don't have that kind of money. Why don't you just get it from Robert? Kelly immediately turned around and refused, reacting strongly to the word compensation. Of course I'll be seeking compensation from Robert too. But you're not family, so the claims will be separate. It's such a shame you won't be able to get married, isn't it? I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Kelly clenched her fists tightly, trembling with frustration and resentment. If you try to run, I'll consult my lawyer and we'll take this to court. When Rebecca said that, Kelly begged for mercy, pleading with us to spare her from legal action. We confirmed where to send the future claims and sent her home for the day. With only our family remaining, the house fell into a deep, uncomfortable silence. Robert stood there, head bowed, shaking. I let out a sigh and said, "Rebecca and I will be staying at my parents' house for a while. Maybe it's time you learned how difficult it is to live on your own for once. It's a good opportunity for you to realize that our lifestyle isn't just thanks to you, Dad." After firmly stating this to Robert, Rebecca and I immediately began packing our bags. Wait, I'm sorry. I apologize for the affair. Just please, don't go to your parents. You're only apologizing because you're worried about appearances. Losing your wife and daughter would be pretty damaging to your career, wouldn't it? When I said that, he fell silent, unable to deny the truth of it. Well then, I won't come back until you've shown some real remorse. With that, Rebecca and I left. When we arrived at my parents' house and told them everything, they were shocked. They probably never imagined Robert could be that kind of person. But they believed me right away and welcomed us with open arms. Deep down, my parents must have suspected that there was something shady behind Robert's perfect image. It's been almost a month since we started living with my parents. I went back to our house once to pick up some belongings I'd left behind. The place was in a miserable state. Clothes were strewn all over the place, the mail had piled up, and it seemed Robert had been living on nothing but instant meals. Ignoring the state of the room, I gathered only the necessities and left. As I was locking the front door, I ran into one of our neighbors who hurried over to me. I thought they were coming to express concern about Robert, but that wasn't the case at all. They looked at me with sympathetic eyes, as if to say, "You finally managed to get away from Robert." Apparently, Robert's recent behavior had made it immediately clear that I had left him. It seems that Robert, who used to say he would do anything for the community, like pulling weeds on the road, has suddenly turned cold. And for good reason. It was actually me who fixed the sign that had been blown away by the wind, not Robert. Robert had only found the blown-away sign and ordered me to fix it, saying it was in the way of his commute and an eyesore. The neighbors saw the situation and had complimented Robert, saying he was lucky to have a wife like me. But Robert believed he had done it all himself. From the next day onward, Robert worked me even harder to show off more to the neighbors. They had been worried about me for a long time, but when they noticed that Robert had stopped trying to impress them recently, they realized I must have left. "You were worried about me. Thank you so much. How has Robert been lately?" When I asked, they told me, but he had become a terribly troublesome resident. Robert doesn't keep track of the garbage collection days and apparently throws away trash whenever he feels like it. On days when it's not garbage day, after collection is over, he shamelessly throws it out without a care. Even when warned, Robert responds like this. "Oh, is that so? I'm sorry, I didn't know. I'll be more careful next time." He puts on a show of reflecting with a smile, but he just leaves the trash he brought and walks away ambiguously. No matter how many times he's told, he gives the same response, so the neighbors are fed up with him. "I'm so sorry. My husband has been causing trouble for all of you." When I apologized, the neighbors sympathized, saying it must have been hard for me to live with a husband like that. Robert himself probably still thinks he can have friendly relations with the neighbors. But the reality is completely different. Everyone was handling Robert with caution. I chatted with the neighbors for a bit longer and then went home. When I get back to my parents' house, I'll tell Rebecca about this and we'll laugh together. When Rebecca heard the story, she scoffed and shared a memory about Robert. "Come to think of it, whenever I got good grades on tests, Dad would praise me. But instead of saying, 'Rebecca, you're amazing,' he'd say things like, 'That's because you're my kid,' or 'It's because I taught you.' He was always only thinking about himself." I couldn't contain my laughter at the thought of Robert being spoken of so harshly by his daughter. I almost felt sorry for him. He's probably like this at work too. He goes on assuming he's the only amazing one, and ends up being avoided by the people around him. As this becomes more and more known to the world, his work will likely decrease. That's what I predicted, and it turned out to be spot on. Robert couldn't handle living alone, so he called other women to the house and had them do housework. He says things to make them happy, like wanting them to be his wife, but in reality, they're just convenient housekeepers. The women called to the house couldn't stand that lifestyle, so they leaked to the tabloids that the education critic who has been getting a lot of attention on TV and in magazines lately actually has a sloppy private life. The article spread in an instant, dealing a huge blow to Robert. He had been careful not to let it slip that he might be getting divorced or that he was having an affair in order to maintain his public image, but a small error in judgment exposed it to the world. His work decreased dramatically in no time. On top of that, people who had worked with Robert in the past started saying that he was actually an arrogant person behind the scenes. If it had been just one person, he could have said it was a baseless lie, but as that person's statement was released, more and more testimonies gathered, and it reached a point where he couldn't make excuses. Robert was completely ostracized from the industry. He's desperately trying to make money in other industries, but since his face and name are well known, he'll probably have zero income for the time being. I scoffed as I thought about my future with Robert. I had thought about taking some distance and giving him another chance if he reflected. But that idea might be too soft. I decided to formally file for divorce and mailed the divorce application to our house. I got a huge number of calls from Robert, but I had decided not to answer no matter what, so I kept ignoring them. He'll probably submit the divorce application while regretting his affair. And he'll likely have the childish idea that he can still start over with Kelly. But such thoughts cannot be allowed. Before that, I made her swear never to see Robert again for the rest of her life, along with a claim for compensation. Kelly will definitely keep that promise. A few days ago, Rebecca and I went to Kelly's house. Kelly was living with her parents, so we told them everything too. Kelly's parents apologized to us profusely. They wrote a sworn statement that they would never let her see him again. In fact, I got a call from Kelly's parents saying that Robert had come to visit, but of course they sent him away without letting him see her. Kelly will probably live under the strict supervision of her parents from now on. She won't be allowed to act freely, and she's sure to spend suffocating and boring days. She'll have an inconvenient life where she's not allowed to meet other men. She'll likely regret having an affair with a married man for the rest of her life. I'll make Kelly and Robert go through hell and reflect properly. And I worked hard to give Rebecca even more enjoyable days than the life she's had so far. When I told her I had vowed to do that, it seemed Rebecca had been thinking the same thing. When I become a lawyer in the future, I should be able to earn more than Dad, so let's definitely get back at him and live in a nice house. I laughed at Rebecca's strong, spirited words. I'm counting on you. I thought my life would become more joyful, and I looked forward to the future. Break your promise and you're dead meat. Don't even think about running away from here. The dirty old man grabbed Rebecca's arm, trying to drag her out of the car. I desperately pulled Rebecca's hand, resisting with all my might. I had to shut the car door, fast. We needed to escape this town, now. In no time, I heard Melissa and Raymond's voices too. Rebecca, wait! Do you have any idea what's gonna happen to us because of you? The three adults going berserk on the dark streets, it was nothing short of insanity. In this backwoods town with no streetlights, I kept running away from these lunatics, together with Rebecca. How on earth did things turn into such a blood-curdling, horrific nightmare? I had come back home after getting news of Rebecca's wedding from Mom, supposedly to celebrate. My name is Jessica. It's been over 8 years since I left my rural family home to live on my own, and I'm now 27. Currently, I work in sales at a pharmaceutical company in Los Angeles. I'm single, but still want to focus on my career for now. Selling new drugs developed by our company to various medical schools and hospitals is grueling work, but it gives me a greater sense of fulfillment than anything else. Pharmaceutical companies and doctors joining hands to save as many patients' lives as possible, there's no greater joy. I moved out of my parents' place right after graduating high school, at the same time as I entered university in LA. I paid for everything myself, including tuition and living expenses. While in college, I juggled multiple part-time jobs. Even before that, back in high school, I had desperately saved up money from part-time work. I was determined not to rely on my parents at all. The biggest reason I wanted to get away from home was my dad. He was always drunk whenever I saw him, wasting money on gambling. He was the farthest thing from a father I could respect. If I was in the same room as Plaster Dad, he'd start harassing me, while Mom just went along with whatever he said. Our family business was farming, and with things the way they were, money was always tight. I decided I needed to take my life into my own hands as soon as possible. The only one I worried about was my one and only sister, Rebecca. Rebecca had a timid personality and got along better with our parents than I did. She's already 32 now, but forget getting married, she hasn't even become independent with a job, just helping out on the family farm. I have unpleasant memories of drunken dad badmouthing Rebecca, saying, "Rebecca's got no street smarts. If she went out to Los Angeles, she'd just get suckered by some sleazebag and be in for a world of pain." If you ask me, Rebecca may be a bit spacey, but she's a beautiful woman with porcelain white skin and great at housework too. Wasting away in a house like this, she was too good for them. Plus, she was always so kind, sticking by my side no matter what. I adored Rebecca. Rebecca knew the state of our household well, so when I was moving out, I invited her to come with me. "You can look for a job after we get to LA. I'll work hard at my part-time gigs too. The two of us can scrape by somehow." But Rebecca just gave me a troubled smile and shook her head. "I'm the oldest daughter, so I'm going to stay here and look after Dad and Mom. I need to help out if we're going to keep the farm going." That's got nothing to do with this. We're both adults. There are tons of families where all the siblings are independent. If you're gonna say you have to live with Dad because you're the oldest, then I won't move to LA either. No. When I emotionally objected to Rebecca's unreasonable claim, she stated clearly to me, "You go. You worked so hard to save up money, didn't you? Besides, it's not just out of obligation. I want to stay here because I'm truly worried about this house and Mom." Her big eyes stared straight into me. There was an unyielding strength in those eyes. Overwhelmed by her intensity, I ended up moving to the city by myself, though part of my heart remained. After that, my college life went smoothly. Balancing my studies with multiple part-time jobs made for a harsh lifestyle, but I was young and had stamina. I also had a fierce determination not to rely on my parents no matter what, so I managed to overcome it all somehow. My constant efforts in the face of adversity were recognized, and I secured a position at a major pharmaceutical company. The training and work after joining the company were even tougher than student life, but I enjoyed gaining business knowledge. And the dream that I would one day be helping to protect people's lives and health fired me up. More than anything, it was Rebecca who became my emotional pillar. Even after leaving home, I kept in touch with Rebecca through messages and phone calls. Some days she would care about my health, saying, "Don't overdo it and ruin your health, okay?" And on other days she would praise me, saying, "Jessica, you're working so hard. You look so vibrant these days." Each time, a warmth would spread through my heart, and I'd feel inspired to work even harder for Rebecca's sake. However, when I'd ask her, "So how are things on your end?" she'd be kind of vague, like, "Dad and Mom are the same as always." Or, "Our profits have gone down but we're getting by somehow." Even if I'd get worried and try to ask for more details about the situation, she'd just brush it off with, "Nothing's changed since you were here, Jessica." In reality, I never heard anything about Rebecca or our parents getting into any big accidents or anything, so I just told Rebecca, "Let me know anytime if something happens. Let me know anytime if something happens." And then, before I knew it, I was 27. That day too, I got home late at night after entertaining clients. Keeping disagreeable doctors in a good mood for hours on end is extremely tiring, but I can manage it if I just think of it as part of the job, for the sake of my performance. As I tried to recharge myself with those thoughts, I checked my apartment mailbox and saw something rare inside. It was a letter from an individual, and looking at the sender, it was from Mom. After moving out, I had stayed in contact with Rebecca, but I hadn't communicated with anyone else at all, not Dad of course, but neither with Mom. They never reached out, and I never called or sent a single letter either. Now this sudden letter from Mom. What in the world could it be about? Still reeling from the surprise and unease, I entered my apartment and read it, exhausted. Reading the contents, I couldn't believe it. Apparently Rebecca was getting married. Huh? I hadn't heard a thing about this. Rebecca and I frequently kept in touch with each other. Yet not once had she breathed a word about a boyfriend, much less marriage. Why was I hearing about it from Mom like this, and not from Rebecca herself? A feeling I couldn't accept spread through my chest. The rest of the letter said that, for the wedding, they were holding a family meeting and I should come back home for it. Finishing the letter, I let out a sigh. Going back to my family home meant going to the house where Dad lived. The area my parents' house is in is truly the boonies, with houses really far apart, surrounded by expanses of farmland and woods. It's not even a town, it's designated a village. If I went back there, I'd have virtually no distractions. It's suffocating, almost like being trapped. Honestly, I wasn't eager to go. But if the news about Rebecca getting married was true, nothing could make me happier. I had thought Rebecca would end up taking care of Dad and Mom her entire life at this rate. If she had met a great guy, fallen in love, and decided to get married, nothing could make me happier. I wanted to meet her partner too, and of course I wanted to see Rebecca. And I wanted to congratulate her on the wedding. The next day, I wrote back to Mom saying I would attend the family meeting, and took paid leave on the appointed day. Then a few weeks passed, and it was the day of the meeting. I rode Amtrak for 7 hours to get to the city where my family home was, then planned to drive a rental car from there. The family meeting was also meant to be a dinner, so the sky was slowly turning to dusk. Away from the din of the city, in a quiet landscape devoid of neon signs or crowds of people, the sky was gradually dyed a deep red. It had been the norm when I was a kid, but coming back after 8 years, it seemed strangely surreal. I managed to arrive at my parents' house without getting lost. It was a dilapidated wooden house, visibly damaged here and there on the walls and roof even from a distance. I could tell the yard, overgrown with weeds, had hardly been tended to. The house was a mess, despite Rebecca's best efforts to keep it clean and tidy. She was overwhelmed with the responsibilities, and it showed. As I stepped inside, memories of my troubled childhood came flooding back, trapped within these walls. It left a bitter taste in my mouth. There was no guest parking, so I had to leave my rental car a short distance away and walk the rest of the way to the house. By then, the sky had darkened considerably. Deep navy blue blended with the remnants of a purple sunset, creating a stunning gradient. The vast expanse of the sky and the crisp air made the first few stars visible. A few crows cawed ominously, their voices echoing through the stillness. With a mixture of nostalgia and resentment, I approached the house's grimy door. That's when I heard it. The faint rustling of grass. Startled, I spun around to find Rebecca standing there, her face tense and uncharacteristic of someone about to attend a family meeting. Despite the years apart, Rebecca was still breathtakingly beautiful. My beloved sister, right there in front of me. It was my favorite Rebecca. But this was no joyful reunion. Rebecca! Shoo! She raised her eyebrows and held a finger to her lips as I started to speak. Confused, I stood there dumbfounded as Rebecca lowered her voice. Why did you come back? What? Wasn't it obvious? I was there to celebrate her wedding. Yet instead of welcoming me, she seemed angry, even upset, at my return. I thought there was a family meeting. Never mind that, we're leaving. Cutting me off, Rebecca grabbed my arm firmly. She dragged me along as she ran, giving me no choice but to follow. None of this made sense. But it was clear that this was no simple family meeting. The situation was far more complicated. Rebecca led me to one of the few bus stops in the village. She pulled me behind a small shelter that doubled as a waiting area. Hey, what's going on? I thought we were having a family meeting tonight about your wedding. I whispered. Out of breath, Rebecca hung her head in silence. Then, we heard footsteps approaching. It was rare for anyone to be out walking at night in this village. It was easy to tell there was only one person coming. Rebecca shielded me, hiding me behind the wall as she peeked out to check the alley. Mom! Rebecca's face turned pale in an instant. Through a gap in her arms, I caught a glimpse of Mom in the alley. In the years I'd been away, Mom seemed to have aged a bit. But even more shocking was that her expression was twisted as if to say it was the very face of a demon. There was still some distance, but it was clear that Melissa was calling out Rebecca's name. Rebecca turned to me and said in a strong tone, "Get away from here right now. And go back to Los Angeles." Why? Hey, what's going on? As if to say there was no time to explain, Rebecca quickly shook her head. Make sure Mom doesn't find you. Dad too. Make sure no one you know finds you. Run away from here as soon as possible. Overwhelmed by Rebecca's intensity, I nodded. Okay. But what about you? I'll meet up with Mom and then go back home. What, you mean? If Rebecca meets Mom. If Rebecca goes back home. What will happen, I wonder? I don't know anything. But my instincts told me I couldn't let Rebecca go home like this. Rebecca, this way. This time, I pulled Rebecca's hand. This is so weird. Mom's acting strange too, and this situation is all messed up. And you say you're getting married, but you don't look happy at all. Jessica. Rebecca lowered her eyebrows sadly, still entrusting one hand to me. I can't return you like this. There's still time now. Let's just run away like this. Let's go to Los Angeles together. But hurry! While Rebecca hesitated, Mom was getting closer. I pulled Rebecca's hand even harder. Whether it was guilt towards her family, or a sense of relief from being freed from the current bizarre situation, Rebecca stared at me with tears in her eyes and gave a small nod. Let's go! We held hands and ran with all our might. Our destination was the rental car I had arrived in. The village was completely steeped in night, and the road with hardly any streetlights had poor visibility. Although we almost stumbled on pebbles along the way, we ran desperately. Rebecca didn't let go of my hand. Soon, we arrived near the car I had come in. As I was inserting the car key, Rebecca suddenly let out a scream beside me. I turned around involuntarily. In the distance, mountains stood in a row, and in the pitch-black scenery with only fields around, I faintly saw the shadow of something. Was it a monkey or an animal? Or was it something else, something living that we shouldn't see? Wrinkled skin, hair growing chaotically from the head. Underneath, something like eyes shone sharply. I mustn't get near this thing. I got goosebumps involuntarily. Before even considering who it was, I felt a physiological disgust. Get in the car, quick! Rebecca shouted in a scream-like voice. That voice was much more tragic and tinged with madness than when she saw Mom. With my hands trembling from fear and anxiety, I finally managed to open the car door. Meanwhile, the figure lurking in the darkness was approaching. I quickly opened the passenger door to get Rebecca in. The person approaching behind Rebecca was an old man. His wrinkled face and overgrown hair looked unsanitary at a glance, while the tacky gold accessories around his neck and wrists reflected the car's headlights. Who was this old man? Was there such a person in this village? There was no time to think. The old man eerily extended his black arm from behind Rebecca and forcefully grabbed her arm, just as she was about to slide into the passenger seat. Eek! Rebecca's scream echoed. The old man was trying to forcibly drag Rebecca out of the car. Where are you running to? The old man groaned in a low, hoarse, beastly voice. Rebecca seemed about to slide off the car seat. I immediately jumped out from the driver's seat to the door on the opposite side. Let go! Let her go! I grabbed the old man's hand that was holding Rebecca from above. With all my strength, I dug my nails in and pried the old man's palm and fingers off Rebecca's arm. Physical strength is vital in sales. And from routinely carrying large amounts of documents, I have a fair amount of strength. While doing so, I stuck out one leg and kicked the old man's foot. The old man stubbornly twisted his body, trying to pull Rebecca closer. Trying to run away, you ungrateful child. Don't think you can escape from here. The old man shouted such things as he grappled with us. After such a brief battle, my strength combined with Rebecca's resistance, and we managed to pry Rebecca from the old man's grip. Just before he changed his stance to grab Rebecca again, I barely managed to close the passenger door. Before he could circle around, I returned to the driver's seat and quickly started the car. Don't break your promise. You stupid woman. I heard the old man's shouting voice from behind. And from somewhere, catching up, I even heard Mom's voice and then Dad's. Rebecca, wait! Do you have any idea what will happen to us because of you? The sight of the three adults going berserk on the night road was nothing but abnormal. And from the situation, it was clear that the old man and our parents were in cahoots. Rebecca kept her head down. Just go. And muttered in a voice that seemed to fade away. That was my intention from the start, so I nodded and pressed hard on the accelerator. As we started to drive, we both let out a big sigh of relief and fatigue. Like a suspenseful drama, I was dumbfounded for a while as I drove. Even with Dad, I half gave up on having a perfectly amicable meal, but I never dreamed it would turn out this crazy. After driving for a while, we arrived at a place where commercial facilities were starting to come into view. Still much less bustling than the city, the lights of convenience stores and commercial facilities on either side considerably reassured me. my marriage was forcibly decided. Rebecca, who had been quietly crying in the passenger seat until then, suddenly spoke. As I suspected, it wasn't her own will after all. Otherwise, she wouldn't have looked so distraught before her wedding. What on earth happened? I prompted Rebecca to continue. The man who tried to grab me in front of the car, he's one of our family's creditors, she revealed. We're in debt? My eyes widened in shock as I turned to face Rebecca. I quickly reminded myself not to neglect safe driving. I'm so ashamed and saddened that this happened under my watch. You remember how bad Dad's drinking and gambling got even when you were still at home? Yeah, that's why I moved out. I wanted to take you with me, Rebecca. She smiled faintly and said, "Thank you for that, by the way." After you left, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get him to stop. Every time he drank, he'd rant about things he hated, hit Mom, and I desperately tried to stop him. It was a vicious cycle. I tried to get him interested in other hobbies, inviting him to watch movies or cook together, but nothing worked. If anything, his habits only got worse. But we're just farmers. It's not like we make a lot of money. Eventually, we couldn't make ends meet anymore. That's when he turned to borrowing money. I can't believe it! Drinking himself into a rage, squandering precious living expenses on gambling in an instant. I couldn't imagine how painful it must have been for her to witness Dad's conduct over these past 8 years. My chest ached with a wrenching mix of pity and remorse. He'd buy massive amounts of alcohol with the borrowed cash, screaming that he'd win it all back gambling the next day. But of course that never happened, and the debts just kept piling up. I don't know if I should ask, but how much does he owe now? Around $70,000. $70,000? I cried out so loudly, I thought the car windows might shatter. How much money did he have to burn through for it to reach that astronomical sum? Faced with such an unimaginable debt, my hands shook on the steering wheel. I couldn't take it anymore. We had no way to pay it back, so Mom and I went directly to the creditor to beg for mercy. To that Kingston guy from earlier. We pleaded with him, "We'll take full responsibility for repaying the principal Dad borrowed, so could you please forgive at least the interest?" And then, Rebecca fell silent after saying this much, trembling slightly. You don't have to force yourself if you don't want to talk about it. No, I'm okay. So then, he said, if you marry my grandson, I'll cut the interest in half. That's how my marriage was decided. No way! You've got to be kidding me! Dad was more than happy to accept those terms, even though it didn't mean he'd have any more money to spend himself. And to think he'd offer up me, his own daughter, so easily to an unwanted marriage. It really hurt to realize I was just property to him. Rebecca went on to say that Mom just went along with whatever Dad said, so she didn't oppose it either. There's more. I really don't want to say this, but Kingston the creditor then said, "You've got a sister in Los Angeles too, right? Hand her over as well, and I'll waive the interest completely." As Rebecca finished recounting her story, she sobbed, tears rolling down her face. A chill ran down my spine. It seems he had intended to lure both Rebecca and myself into his household from the start, deliberately inflating the debt to gain leverage in negotiations. Trading your daughters for money, like some horrific custom from decades past, I couldn't believe this was happening to my own family. Overwhelmed by the terror of it all, I had to pull over onto the road shoulder. Now that my hands were free, I embraced Rebecca's shoulders in the passenger seat. Rebecca! I'm so sorry you had to go through that. No, I'm the one who should apologize for letting things get this bad, for not being able to stop Dad, for getting you dragged into this too. I'm so sorry. There amidst the streets still tinged with a rural atmosphere, we two sisters held each other and cried freely. I couldn't imagine how painful, lonely, and hopeless her days must have been. I wondered why I couldn't have helped her sooner. Things got so bad, I considered running away. But he threatened me, saying if you try to escape, I'll hunt down your sister and drag her back here. That's why I couldn't say anything about this the last time we spoke on the phone. I'm sorry. Rebecca, you've been shouldering this burden all alone. It must have been so hard. But it's going to be okay now. I'm here for you. We'll get through this together. After crying together for a while longer, we got back in the car and hit the road again. Since we had left the village early, we were able to catch the overnight train. With Rebecca by my side, I returned to the now familiar sights of Los Angeles. Glancing at Rebecca walking beside me and the lingering goosebumps on my skin, I was reminded that the series of events in that village were not just a dream. By the time we arrived at my apartment, we were both exhausted. We ate breakfast together and took a nap in the warm, cozy bed. Afterwards, Rebecca pulled the IOU for the debt in question out of her pocket. Actually, I've been carrying this on me at all times. That's my sister for you, good thinking. With this, we have options. Especially here in Los Angeles. I took one more day off work and immediately looked up reputable law firms. That same day, Rebecca and I visited one, IOU in hand. The lawyer had a serious expression as he explained several things to us. Afterwards, we stopped by the municipal office to consult about cutting ties with our parents. After Rebecca stayed with me in my apartment for about a week, we decided to visit our family home once more. To declare to our parents that we were severing our relationship. The moment we came face to face, Dad was already furious, while Mom sat next to him trembling, her face pale. Either he was already drunk or his face was flushed red with rage. As soon as he heard that we wanted to cut ties, he bellowed, "Don't screw with me!" He grabbed a nearby bottle and brandished it at Rebecca. I leapt forward just in time to stop him. "You too, Jessica! If you had just come home like a good girl, everything would have worked out," he shouted, this time trying to hit me with the bottle. "Cut it out already!" Shielding Rebecca, I desperately dodged Dad's relentless attacks. Our defensive battle against Dad's rampage continued. But in a moment of vulnerability, the bottle Dad was swinging struck my shoulder hard. "Ow!" Crying out from the impact, I fell to the floor with a thud. But immediately after, I glared up at Dad and announced in a low voice, "Dad, this is all being recorded, you know." Just as Dad let out a stupid sounding, "Huh?" I glanced back towards the living room entrance. From there, a man in a suit holding a camera quietly emerged. He was the lawyer in charge of our debt consultation, Mr. Young. Mr. Young calmly stated, "This is video evidence of domestic violence." I had deliberately created an opening, letting Dad hit me, to capture concrete proof of his violence on camera. Dad sputtered, You coward! Calling a lawyer, you city folk are always so damn sneaky." Mom and the lawyer tried to calm Dad down and get him to take a seat, but he resisted, shouting all the while. But then the lawyer dispassionately declared, "As we have clear evidence of violence here, we will be calling the police now." And with that, he smoothly proceeded to contact the police. "The police? Isn't that going too far?" Still clutching the bottle he had just hit me with, Dad was visibly shaken. Mom's face turned ashen. It was entirely possible that in this situation, Dad would fly off the handle at the slightest provocation and make any discussion impossible. Besides, even if he called the police on us, Rebecca and I were cutting ties anyway. We had nothing left to lose. Surprisingly, the police arrived with uncharacteristic speed for such a remote village. 2 sturdy male officers showed up, looking strong enough to easily subdue a drunk old man in his 60s like Dad. Seeing them, Dad clicked his tongue and deflated. "What, you're here to arrest me or something? That has not been decided yet. We will be discussing those matters and more with you now." Flanked by the 2 policemen, the lawyer declared this clearly. Dad's demeanor took a complete 180 as he meekly sat down, looking uncharacteristically compliant. Young opened the IOU and explained that neither Rebecca nor I were listed as guarantors, so we had no obligation to repay our parents' debt. Furthermore, you 2 confiscated all of Rebecca's money and used it to pay back the debt. And in order to serve Mr. Osborne's personal interests, you robbed Rebecca of her free will and tried to force her into marriage. Rebecca can sue you for attempting to file a marriage certificate without her consent. Sue? Who's gonna listen to some outsider from the city? Dad tried to lash out again, but the police officers glared at him. He promptly fell silent once more. In addition, we have the footage of the domestic violence incident from earlier. Moreover, Rebecca has several unnatural bruises on her body. The lawyer spoke matter-of-factly, but I could hardly bear to hear this. After speaking with her directly, it seems highly likely these bruises are the result of violence inflicted by Mr. Osborne. In this case, it is possible to either demand compensation or treat it as a criminal matter. I hung my head, on the verge of tears. When I deliberately let myself get hit earlier, it hurt quite a bit. Rebecca had endured that pain over and over again. At the hands of Dad, who lost all self-control when he was drunk. How painful and difficult it must have been for her. I will never forgive Dad for everything he's done, nor Mom for failing to stop any of it.
What bruises? You got any proof?
Dad shouted. Mom started. Please, have mercy on us. Groveling in a deep apology. We're already in ruins just from the debt alone. It's not like I wanted to hand my daughter over to that man either. But we had no choice. And now you want to cut ties too? Compensation? That's impossible. Please, don't do this.
It's too late for that now, Mom. You never even tried to protect Rebecca until things got this bad.
You're one to talk, running away from home. That's right, you're working in Los Angeles now, aren't you, Jessica? I bet you're making good money. If you paid off Raymond's debts for us, couldn't we just sweep this all under the rug? Mom looked up at me in tears, fawning. Rage exploded in my head. It wasn't just Dad in the end. This woman was also someone who only saw her own children as money or property.
Enough already! Like hell I'm paying! What do you two think your kids are? Rebecca and I are human beings. We're not money printing machines or things you can just do whatever you want with.
I shouted at my parents. I wanted so badly to hit them, but I restrained myself somehow, knowing that if I resorted to violence, the story would change.
Both Rebecca and I want to live our lives freely. We're cutting ties with this household. From now on, Rebecca will be living in Los Angeles too. We won't be contacting you at all.
Leaving those words behind, I grabbed Rebecca's hand and briskly walked out of the house. The lawyer followed close behind us. The police officers said,
"We've heard what you have to say. We'll hand off the rest of this matter to our colleagues in Los Angeles,"
and then left. We decided to handle any future discussions of compensation or lawsuits through our lawyer. Afterwards, I took care of various procedures while Rebecca lived together with me in my apartment. Then a few months later, as a result of the trial, our parents were slapped with a restraining order preventing them from contacting Rebecca or myself. They were also obligated to pay back the money they had taken from Rebecca. And we were able to demand compensation from Kingston, the creditor who had tried to force Rebecca to marry his grandson. The IOU was passed on to Kingston's son. The fact remained that Dad had borrowed a massive sum, so our parents would have to work at the factory run by Kingston's son to pay back the debt. As a rural factory, the wages were nothing to write home about. Who knows how long it would take them to pay everything back. Furthermore, after consultations with the lawyer and experts, Dad was diagnosed with alcohol dependence. Treatment would require money for hospital visits and counseling. On top of the debt repayment, those expenses ensured they would have zero financial leeway for luxuries like alcohol. If anything, it was questionable whether they could even maintain a normal standard of living. While our parents were left to face the consequences of their actions, Rebecca and I, having successfully cut ties with them, lived together happily and peacefully. Through my acquaintances and friends, I introduced Rebecca to a job. With her diligence and good manners, she quickly won over her employers and secured the position. More time passed, and then,
"Rebecca, is that true?"
She had some surprising news for me. Apparently, one of her coworkers had asked her out, and they had started dating. I was overjoyed for Rebecca's newfound love and cooked a special dinner that night.
"Jessica, you're way too excited about this. It's kind of embarrassing."
I can't help but be thrilled. Not only did we finally free you from being trapped in that house, but now you've found a boyfriend of your own free will. I'm so happy I could cry. Tearing up with joy, I clasped Rebecca's hands.
"Jessica, thank you, truly. It's because I had you that I can walk my own path in life now."
No, that's not true. It's all thanks to how hard you worked, Rebecca. Jessica and I had both found partners in our line of work, and we were making plans for a double date in the near future. The Rebecca I saw now was a far cry from the grief-stricken, desperate woman from that nightmarish evening. She exuded vitality and healthfulness, radiating an aura of happiness as both a person and a woman. We were determined to continue doing the work we loved, using the money we earned to enrich our own lives. We would date partners of our own choosing, with hopes of eventually getting married. As we each sought fulfillment in our individual lives, I knew our friendship would endure, the bond between us unbreakable.
Emily, is Grandpa behaving himself?
Oh, yes, well, kind of.
Injuring his leg, old people can be such a nuisance. I wish they'd think about those of us who have to take care of them. Patricia, that's not a nice way to say it.
It's fine, he's already declining quite a bit.
I can't handle the fuss of old people.
But you're used to it, so you'll be fine. The other day, my husband's grandfather, Michael, fell in the garden and injured his leg. It's not a serious injury, but he's already 82 years old. Because of his age, we're having him rest in bed just to be safe, so it doesn't get worse. My mother-in-law won't even go near him, let alone take care of him. I'm Emily, 30 years old. I married 3 years ago and live with my husband Daniel's family. My husband was my boss at the company where I worked, a company founded by his grandfather. When I joined 8 years ago, my father-in-law was already the president, and my grandfather-in-law was the chairman. But back then, the grandfather was still handling all the important tasks and responsibilities of the company. 2 years ago, when Grandpa turned 80, he remained chairman but handed over most of the public duties to my father-in-law.
Michael, you've worked hard all this time. Now leave the company matters to Christopher and take it easy.
My mother-in-law said with a smile, but her words sounded sarcastic to me. Grandfather-in-law is a bit stubborn but a fair and kind person with a good reputation. In contrast, my father-in-law seems somewhat immature, never expressing his opinions clearly, and utterly unreliable compared to Grandpa. And he always does whatever my mother-in-law says. My grandmother-in-law has already passed away, and I never met her. My husband and I started dating when we worked together on the same product planning team 3 years after I joined the company. My husband, who was energetically leading the team, seemed reliable to me, though a bit self-righteous. Maybe I felt that way because I lost my father early and grew up with just my mother. My mother also passed away from illness 2 years ago, and now I have no family other than my in-laws. Shortly after I got married, my mother fell ill and needed care. So I quit my job to take care of her. The fact that my husband's family didn't object was probably due to a single comment from Grandpa.
It's only natural to take care of the mother who raised you alone. Don't worry and take good care of her.
Thanks to that, I was able to be by my mother's side every day for a year without financial worries until she passed away. My mother-in-law seemed a bit dissatisfied, but I was truly grateful. However, since Grandpa handed over the company to my father-in-law, everyone's attitude towards him has gradually changed. They no longer listen to his opinions as much. And I can't shake the feeling that they're treating him carelessly. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but watching my mother-in-law and husband's behavior, I can't help but feel that way. My father-in-law's attitude is non-committal. But it feels like he's ignoring Grandpa, as if he's no longer needed since he's practically retired. Watching my in-laws' behavior, I feel somewhat angry.
Hey, don't you think your attitude, Patricia, and yours too, is a bit cold towards Grandpa?
So, what's the big deal?
Grandpa tries to talk to you, and you barely respond. You don't even try to help him. Like I have time to deal with old people.
You can take care of Grandpa. You're the one with free time.
You don't have to talk like that.
Quiet. I'm tired from work. Don't nag me about unnecessary things. This is how it goes. No matter what I say, they won't listen to me. My grandfather-in-law doesn't say anything to his family about this. Now, I'm the only one who talks to my grandfather-in-law at home.
Grandpa, the weather is nice today. Shall we go for a little walk outside? Your leg seems to be healing well, and I think it will be good rehabilitation.
Thank you. Let's go out for a bit then. When the two of us went to the park, there were several families with children playing around. My grandfather-in-law looked at the scene with joy. Christopher and Daniel had times like that too. Grandpa? I was busy with work and couldn't take care of the children much. Maybe that's why I couldn't raise Christopher and Daniel properly. My grandfather-in-law said with a slightly sad face, almost like he was talking to himself. Christopher is my father-in-law, and Daniel is my husband. I think about how everyone can be kinder to my grandfather-in-law, but I can't come up with a good idea. But then, my in-laws suggested building a house for my grandfather-in-law. This house is over 50 years old, right? The layout is bad, it's hard to use, and instead of spending money on repairs, it would be better to build a new house in a more convenient location. A new house? Michael is getting older, and it's good that he only got injured last time, but we never know what will happen. So, let's make the house barrier free so we won't have trouble if care is needed. I see. We can even put Michael's room in the middle so everyone can take care of him easily. Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
Right. So, it's settled then? And Michael, about the cost.
If it's a house for all of us, I'll take care of it. Talk to Mr. Jones about the money.
Typical Michael. Thank you. We appreciate it.
My mother-in-law smiled happily. It seems to me that they only flatter him when they want money. But if everyone takes care of my grandfather-in-law after moving to the new house, I thought there could be nothing better. Mr. Jones is the company's in-house counsel and also manages my grandfather-in-law's personal assets. My grandfather-in-law liked his character and made him in-house counsel, and it's been nearly 30 years. He's 58 now and the person my grandfather-in-law trusts the most. I've met him several times, and he seems to be a very honest person. He always cares about my grandfather-in-law's health, and sometimes I think he's more like a son than his real sons. Having such people around my grandfather-in-law makes me feel a little relieved. I wasn't informed about where or what kind of house was being built. But my mother-in-law seemed very cheerful, and the three of them were looking at interior design magazines and discussing various things. So it seemed to be going smoothly. Then something unexpected happened. It was revealed that my grandfather-in-law had a debt of $1,820,000.
Wait, what's this about $1,820,000?
My grandfather-in-law had become a co-signer for a loan for a friend's company. But that company was in trouble, and the debt had become my grandfather-in-law's responsibility.
Wait, they're not going to take the house that's under construction, are they?
Since the contract has already been completed, and as Patricia said, it's in the president's name, so it's fine. My mother-in-law seemed relieved at those words.
Oh, thank goodness. I'm glad we did it my way.
Listening to that conversation, I learned for the first time that the house was in my father-in-law's name. Even though my grandfather-in-law had paid for it, putting it in my father-in-law's name seemed just like something my mother-in-law would do. I also wondered why they didn't think of giving up the house to help repay the debt.
Hey, this debt is Michael's fault, and it has nothing to do with us or the company, right?
Well, it was signed in Michael's name.
Oh, good. Then there's no problem.
I couldn't understand what was good about it. But since my grandfather-in-law didn't say anything during that conversation, I didn't intervene either. After all, it's not an amount I could handle. And a few days later, my grandfather-in-law's behavior began to change gradually. "Grandpa, what would you like for lunch?"
Who are you calling Grandpa? I'm only 50. You have no right to call me that. Huh?
Sorry. Emily, right? I was lost in thought. At first, I thought he was just deep in thought, but when it happened repeatedly, I began to feel uneasy.
Patricia, what are you doing? Where's my meal?
Grandpa, I'm Emily. Patricia is your daughter-in-law. You ate your meal earlier.
I didn't eat. Are you trying to starve me?
I wondered if my grandfather-in-law's condition was triggered by the $1,820,000 debt. And seeing that none of his family members were trying to help him might have been a double shock. What can I do for him? I tried to take my grandfather-in-law to the hospital, but he refused to go. He might not want to admit that he might have dementia. I don't want to force him, but I can't do anything on my own. I consulted my husband, but he only replied that it had nothing to do with him. I can't rely on my mother-in-law either. So I thought my father-in-law was the only option.
Yeah, I heard from Patricia and Daniel. They think it might be dementia?
Can you go to the hospital with us?
But it's not that bad yet, right? If we go to the hospital, others will find out. My father having dementia.
There are good medications now that can slow the progression.
Well, there's no need to rush. Let's watch him a little longer. Emily is here, so it'll be fine, right?
I can't help but think how unreliable these people are. I can't depend on them. Grandpa, let's go to the hospital. Let's get you properly examined.
Who are you? Where are you planning to take me? You're up to no good.
I almost cry thinking about how my once kind grandfather-in-law has become so stubborn. But my mother-in-law just laughs, amused.
Even if he was the chairman, it's over for him now. But now everything, even the company, is all Christopher's. Patricia, Grandpa isn't completely unaware. He's listening to everything.
He'll forget everything soon. He'll start wandering, dribbling.
Just thinking about it gives me chills. He's nothing but a nuisance now. How can you say that? Grandpa has worked hard for the family all his life.
My mother-in-law's words make me angry and sad. But my grandfather-in-law just smiles.
See? This old man doesn't understand anything. Patricia!
I'm furious at my mother-in-law's laughing and words. But soon, the new house will be ready. Things might change once we move there. Since it's a house that Grandpa built, the family might show some gratitude and be kind to him. I couldn't completely abandon that faint hope. And 2 months later, the house was finally built. For days, I had been forced to pack my in-laws' and husband's belongings, while my father-in-law's and my things were mostly untouched. Even when I tried to pack my things, my in-laws and husband kept giving me tasks, so I couldn't make any progress. But I thought it would be fine to move the small things later since this house wasn't going away. On moving day, after moving most of the things, I went to call my father-in-law, but my husband said, "You and Grandpa can stay here."
What?
You can stay in this house.
We don't need any extra baggage in the new house.
In other words, you and Grandpa will live here from now on. And I'll give you Grandpa's debt too. Well, you can at least be a housekeeper.
Hey, let's go. Yeah, I'm coming. Good luck with the debt repayment and live in care.
With those words, my in-laws cheerfully got into the car and left. I was stunned for a while. I couldn't immediately understand what had just happened. Were we just abandoned? And not just me, but my grandfather-in-law too. Only they would live in the new house. It took me a while to understand because it was beyond my imagination that someone could do something so cruel. How should I explain this to my grandfather-in-law? I slowly returned to the back room. I don't mind taking care of my grandfather-in-law at all. That was my intention from the start. As I was about to timidly call out to him, who was sitting with his back to me, he seemed to sense my presence and turned around before I could speak. "Have they gone already?" My grandfather-in-law's expression as he said that looked completely different from the dazed look he had just moments ago. To be frank, he seemed like a different person. I thought maybe a different symptom had emerged. But the next moment, my grandfather-in-law smiled. And then, his following words surprised me. As I was talking to my grandfather-in-law, Mr. Jones came. "Chairman, have you finished getting rid of the unnecessary staff?" "Yes, it's all done." "Let's go, shall we?"
Where are we going?"
"Of course, to the new house." I left the house where I had been living, led by my grandfather-in-law, without understanding what was happening. The next month, countless calls came from my mother-in-law and husband. My grandfather-in-law said he wouldn't deal with them anymore, but I answered my husband's call because of the divorce.
"Hey, Emily! Is Grandpa with you? When I went to the old house, it was for sale. It's not worth $1,820,000, so you can't repay the debt. Is that why you did that?"
"What do you mean?"
"Put Grandpa on. Dad said he can't get in touch at all. That forgetful old man has done something outrageous."
I knew what he was talking about, but I wanted to hear what my husband would say.
"Grandpa sold the company's stocks to the executive director. Thanks to that, the executive director became the largest shareholder, and a shareholders' meeting and board meeting were held. And Dad was dismissed as president."
"But the executive director is well liked, and maybe Grandpa thought he was better to hand over the company to?"
"The executive director must have deceived the senile old man into selling the stocks. This is invalid."
"You seem to be misunderstanding something, but Grandpa doesn't have dementia. If anything, he seems more coherent than before."
"What?"
I too, until that moving day, had seriously thought that my grandfather-in-law had dementia. It seems that my grandfather-in-law had been suspicious from the time my mother-in-law said she would build a house to live with him. So he devised a plan. He pretended to have dementia to see how my in-laws and husband would react. As expected, they showed their true colors one after another. In the end, they left my grandfather-in-law and me behind. I struggled to hold back my laughter because everything went exactly as I expected. My grandfather-in-law said. I was surprised, relieved, and a little conflicted.
"To deceive the enemy, you must first deceive your allies."
He laughed. He seemed to have been getting regular updates on the company from the executive director and Mr. Jones. With my grandfather-in-law gone, my father-in-law and husband did as they pleased. Self-righteous, completely ignoring the opinions of the employees. Constant entertaining at the company's expense. He had handed over the company to my father-in-law, but he was worried about the future, so he took this measure. In the end, he decided he couldn't entrust it to his son and left it to the executive director.
"What about the $1,820,000 debt?"
"That's gone now." Indeed, my grandfather-in-law had been a guarantor for a friend's debt. But he also owned personal assets that exceeded that. After stepping back from the company's operations, he had invested in real estate and made a considerable profit. So there was no problem at all, but if I had said that, it was clear that my mother-in-law and husband would target it. That's why I only talked about the debt. The friend was the son of a benefactor who had helped my father-in-law when he was young. Moreover, since then, the countryside land that the son owned was going to be developed into a resort. And he was able to sell it at a high price, so there was no need to take on the debt.
You're kidding!
But more importantly, are you guys okay?
We're not okay. Both my father and I were denounced by the company. What should we do now?
Well, there's also the mortgage on the house.
What? What do you mean, the mortgage on the house?
Huh? You haven't realized it yet?
The house money should have been all paid by Grandpa.
Maybe you don't remember what Grandpa said at that time? When my mother-in-law talked to my grandfather-in-law about money, he had set the condition that if it's a house where everyone, including me, will live. In other words, if that wasn't the case, he wouldn't pay. Even if the house was in my father-in-law's name, my grandfather-in-law intended to pay if everyone was living together.
That's just because you assumed Grandpa would pay and didn't look at the documents properly, right?
Christopher's signing without checking everything. It shows he really didn't have the qualities of a president.
You're kidding!
Afterward, my parents-in-law ended up losing the house they had built because they couldn't pay the mortgage. Now they live in an old apartment over 50 years old and are struggling to pay off the unpaid loan. My mother-in-law and husband have been contacting me alternately, saying we should all live together, but that's impossible now. My grandfather-in-law has retired from his chairman position, and now he has bought an old house in the countryside, and we are living together. Emily, you can go and live wherever you like, freely. You don't have to worry about living expenses. My grandfather-in-law told me, but I chose to be with him. If I'm not in the way, please let me be with you. When I said that, my grandfather-in-law's eyes welled up with tears. Thanks to Mr. Jones, the divorce was finalized, and procedures were taken to exclude my former father-in-law and former husband from inheritance. And I became my grandfather-in-law's adopted daughter. If anything happens to my grandfather-in-law, who has become my father, I intend to take care of him until the end. Now, the two of us enjoy working in the fields together.
Dad, look at this radish. It's big.
In the pouring sunlight, warm moments flow. I wish for these days to continue even one day longer.
Don't leave the TV on, and either turn off the lights in the living room or your room.
Got it. I'll make sure to save electricity. I left the house to go shopping far away. Whether leaving or staying at home, we as a family are committed to saving energy, like remembering to turn off lights and setting the air conditioner to the right temperature. Today, like always, we reminded each other in the family, and I went out. However, a few hours later when I returned, our dear home had completely changed.
Since you love saving so much, I'll save electricity for you.
The sound that echoed maliciously was Amelia's laughter. Amelia, who sneaked in secretly, had turned off our home's breaker, causing a major problem. The reason she did this? My name is Emma. At 29, I married Liam, my same-aged partner, and moved into my in-laws' house. My mother-in-law had already passed away, and my father-in-law, James, who has a respiratory illness, was living alone. Persuaded by my concerned husband, I started living there while continuing my job. In the in-laws' house, there was also the unmarried Amelia, but we never really got along. James is calm and kind, much like my husband. In contrast, his sister Amelia is temperamental and volatile. Being straightforward, I often clashed with her, and being a few years older, I was somehow managing to keep her in check. Excluding her, it was a peaceful life. But within half a year, James's illness worsened. He needed an oxygen machine even to stay at home. Both Amelia and I were working, so there was no one to help James during the day. We should have arranged for him to live in a care facility, but James refused to leave the house filled with memories of his wife. Consulting with my husband, we concluded it would be cruel to force James to move. So, we hired a caregiver, but that led to more problems. Already not getting along with me, Amelia disliked strangers entering her home and started harassing the caregiver. Invisibly to us, she was abusive and sarcastic, obstructing the work, and repeatedly complained to the agency, saying they couldn't be trusted with her father. By the time we realized the cause, multiple caregivers had quit, and the agency told us they couldn't send anyone new. What do we do now? Other agencies have refused us too.
We must be blacklisted, damn it, all because of Amelia.
Known as a troublesome household, we could no longer hope for a caregiver. We had to think of a solution with a sigh. Amelia, always self-centered, had isolated herself from the family. My husband, as her brother, tried to correct her, but it only led to fierce arguments, and he eventually told her to move out and live independently. But Amelia, angered by such reprimands, started complaining to me, as I was less intimidating than her brother.
You're a daughter-in-law now, so you should take care of him, Emma. Liam can't quit his job, being a man, but you're different.
Overheard by my husband, this sparked another argument. This situation didn't allow James to rest and recover peacefully. I didn't want to give in to Amelia's demands, but I couldn't just stand by either. Feeling indebted to James, who had tried to make me feel at home despite his illness, I decided,
I'll quit my job and take care of James. I'll start learning about caregiving bit by bit. After all, James is family to me too.
When I finally decided to resign for caregiving, James and my husband thanked me with tears. It was a real challenge learning about caregiving from scratch, but James always kindly encouraged me, despite my struggles. The only thing that didn't change was Amelia. She neither moved out nor helped with the housework or caregiving. On her days off, she would disappear, presumably to hang out. Even though I had more time, I was busy with James and studying for caregiving. My husband and I shared household chores, but whenever something was missed, Amelia was quick to complain.
Oh, Emma decided to take on both caregiving and housework, right? You like doing everything yourself, don't you?
If I even slightly talked back, she would retaliate unpleasantly. She kept harassing me like this, but was always found out and scolded by my husband and others. Every time, she would play the victim, saying, James is too kind to say anything, so I'm doing it for him. Naturally, things didn't improve, and her constant interference slowed down my household tasks, quickly piling up stress. I'm truly grateful to the caregivers who managed to smile and care for James despite her meddling. Not just me, but James and the others were fed up with Amelia's persistent attitude. However, one day, while my husband and I were secretly discussing how to encourage her independence, she announced,
I got engaged and I'm moving out. Goodbye, Dad. I'll come back to visit sometimes.
With that, Amelia left the house obediently. We were surprised, but with her stormy presence gone, the house's atmosphere stabilized. James was aging and his condition was a concern, so there were talks of moving him to a care facility, but as I got accustomed to caregiving, we decided to continue with home care. Amelia, now living at her fiancé's place, often returned home.
I bet there'll be leftovers from dinner tonight. Put them in a Tupperware, I'll take them with me.
Apparently, she was relying on our leftovers to avoid cooking for her fiancé. Her selfishness remained, treating me like a housemaid as before.
Amelia, don't order Emma around without helping yourself.
Yeah, sorry Emma.
That's enough, right?
Hurry up with the dinner. Even when scolded by James, she would dismiss it with an indifferent attitude. Honestly, the amount of food I had to prepare didn't change much from before she left, so that wasn't really an issue. Rather, the problem was the food and utility costs. Although Amelia had moved out and stopped contributing financially, her frequent returns and unrestrained behavior strained our budget. Moreover, she had no sense of saving electricity or money.
Amelia, turn off the lights in unused rooms. Can I go ahead if you're not using the shower?
Amelia, lying on the couch with her back to the still-on TV, seemed to be playing games on her mobile phone. She had left the lights on in the bathroom and changing room, indicating she'd take a shower, but showed no signs of moving. The unnecessary electricity use and her lingering were holding everyone back. When I asked her to decide between gaming or showering, Amelia glared at me angrily. "Don't tell me what to do. I was just about to go."
You always nag about saving and cutting costs, but it hardly makes a difference.
You're so petty, Auntie.
What did you just call me?
I called you Emma. Don't pretend you heard wrong and get mad. She retorted, even as James scolded her. While saying this, Amelia finally turned off the TV and headed to the changing room. She always complained, but at least she listened to what was said. However, having worked for years and having a fiancé, her mindset remained that of a rebellious child. I had stopped expecting her to act her age. Though I didn't mind it, our relationship with Amelia didn't improve even after she left home, remaining tense. I had hoped that saving money could be a common ground for our family, but that too seemed unlikely. One day, I was driving to a large shopping mall in the suburbs, away from home. I was running an errand for James. James wasn't unable to go out, but he needed to carry a portable oxygen tank when he did. For the elderly James, carrying the heavy tank, even with a carrier, was burdensome, and the visible tubes made it obvious he was on oxygen therapy. Tired of being pitted by acquaintances saying, "Poor thing," each time they saw him, James preferred staying home. There were often errands, but my husband usually handled them when he was home. Being careful not to leave James alone, this time I had no choice but to leave him for the errand. I was worried, but James wasn't helpless. He only needed the tank for breathing. He was still capable of doing quite a bit by himself. While it's important to be mindful of saving electricity, I asked him to use the air conditioning as needed, and I set off for shopping. I completed the shopping without issues and returned home with the groceries a few hours later. I had left in the late morning, but now it was evening. Before entering the house, I picked up my mobile phone. There might be a message from my husband about dinner. However, what I saw on the screen shocked me.
Huh?
There were numerous missed calls. From my husband, James, and the general hospital where James goes. A cold sweat broke out on my back. While driving, I had switched my phone to a mode that wouldn't ring. And in my rush to get home early today, I forgot to switch it back, unaware of the incoming calls. A sense of foreboding crossed my mind. First, I tried calling back my husband, but the phone just kept ringing without connecting. Growing more anxious, I then tried James's number, but there was no answer. As a last hope, I called the hospital. A receptionist answered, and trying to stay composed, I asked about James.
James is currently hospitalized. I can't provide more details over the phone. Could you please come to the hospital?
After being transferred to several departments, I was informed of this and froze. I quickly replied, "I'm on my way," and hurriedly turned the car key, restarting the engine. The car was filled with urgency. As if reflecting my anxiety, the roads were congested. James had been fine when I left, waving goodbye as usual. I regretted leaving him alone, wondering how he could have been hospitalized so suddenly. Arriving at the hospital, I headed to the directed room. Walking down the tense corridor, I quietly opened the door, and there sat my husband, who had been unreachable. We looked at each other in surprise. But he explained that he was at the hospital waiting for James's tests, which is why he couldn't answer the phone. I couldn't answer the phone either, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So, how is James doing?
He prompted me to look at James, who was sleeping in the bed. His complexion seemed a bit off, but his breathing, which I had been worried about, appeared calm.
He's okay. There's no problem with his condition. He's just here for some tests. Actually,
hearing from my husband that James was not in danger, I finally relaxed. But why was James hospitalized? Just as I was about to ask that question, the door to the room burst open. It was Amelia, rushing in, her eyes filled with fear. She ignored us and ran straight to James's bed. Seeing him lying there, she let out a loud scream.
What happened? Dad!
Her voice was so loud that my husband hurried to calm her down. But her frantic voice echoed through the room.
Please calm down!
My husband tried to pull her away from the bed. Her frightened voice eventually quietened down, but then she suddenly glared at me and started yelling with intense emotion.
What were you doing while you were with him?
I was overwhelmed by her anger and lost for words. My husband intervened to calm her, but her anger was still directed at me. Confused, I was caught in a strange sensation. James needed oxygen, but such a sudden hospitalization seemed unlikely.
Wait, can we talk calmly?
My husband turned to us with a calm voice, explaining what he knew. James was transported here because the power to his oxygen device had turned off. After I left, James had been sleeping in his room, but during that time, the power went off. Awoken by breathlessness and trying to turn the device back on, it wouldn't work, and he couldn't reach me or my husband. James connected a portable tank and managed to calm down, but he was anxious about waiting for us to return. Feeling a headache, James decided to go to the hospital, but we usually drive him, so he had no way to get there. He tried to call a taxi, but his hands were trembling, making it difficult to dial. So, James went to ask the neighbors to call a taxi for him. The neighbor who came out to the entrance screamed upon seeing James. He was taken to the living room, laid down, and cooled with ice packs while waiting for the ambulance. That's when James realized he had gotten heat stroke. After that, thanks to the appropriate treatment at the hospital, James's condition stabilized and he was safe. My husband heard from the doctor that James might not have noticed the heat due to his age, and he thought the trembling hands and headache were just symptoms of aging. Because James had convulsions, he was immediately treated and hospitalized for testing, leading to the current situation. After hearing this explanation from my husband, I asked him a daring question.
It's unlikely that the power source for the device wouldn't work. Didn't we install it in a place where the plug couldn't be accidentally pulled out?
My husband furrowed his brow and seemed deep in thought. Amelia remained silent during this time, but her face was visibly pale.
That's right. It's impossible for it to come unplugged on its own. I went back home to check, and the plug wasn't out. Then how?
I was even more confused by my husband's words. He had returned home to prepare for the hospital stay, and found that although the power was off, the plug was still connected. He then looked sternly at Amelia. It was clear she was hiding something, but I couldn't understand why he was so angry. Suddenly, my husband shouted at Amelia.
You cut off the breaker, didn't you? Say something.
Amelia jolted, beginning to tremble. She tried to say something, but only inaudible sounds came out. Then, my husband pulled something out of his pocket. The hospital had tried to contact me, my husband, and Amelia several times, but my husband was the first to get through. When he returned home for the preparations, he immediately sensed something odd. As soon as he opened the door, a wave of incredible heat hit him. The lights in the entrance hall didn't work. Realizing this, he checked around the house and found all electrical appliances were off. He rushed to check the breaker, and as expected, the switch was turned off. Surprised and suspicious, he wondered why this happened. There was no event like a lightning strike to cause the breaker to trip, and no other houses seemed to be affected by a power outage. However, he then remembered something. Our house had several security cameras installed. Before we got married, a burglar had broken into the house, and James had installed them for my mother-in-law's peace of mind. Even though we were saving money, these were kept for everyone's safety, and we weren't allowed to remove them. Footage up until the power outage should still be there, my husband thought, so he quickly restored the power and checked the recordings. I have the footage here. I transferred it to show both of you. In the hospital room, my husband took out his mobile phone. He showed us the transferred footage. The first thing shown was the familiar view of our house's entrance. A few minutes after I left, Amelia appeared. I was surprised to learn she had come to the house and involuntarily glanced at her. She entered the house using her key. Unlike her usual noise, she looked around suspiciously, almost as if she was checking if I was away. My husband then switched to the footage from a camera inside the entrance. The breaker in our house is located near the ceiling above the shoe rack. Amelia climbed onto a chair meant for wearing shoes and opened the breaker's cover.
What are you doing?
Even though I knew what was coming, I couldn't suppress my scream. The camera had sound recognition, so along with the movement noises, her dreadful whispering was recorded.
This is the breaker, right? If the fridge stops, Emma will calm down a bit.
Her malicious laughter echoed in the silent hospital room.
I'll save electricity for you, your favorite.
After that, the footage ended due to her turning off the breaker. We were all speechless and motionless. If the breaker was off, of course, the whole house's power supply would stop. The contents of the fridge must have spoiled in the hours before my husband noticed. Her frantic behavior when she rushed into the hospital room suggested she hadn't realized her actions could endanger James's life, a very malicious way to punish me. However, her reaction was unbelievable.
It's because you're always nagging about saving electricity.
Without any signs of remorse, and with tears in her eyes, Amelia started justifying herself.
I didn't know James was home. I thought he had gone out with you. It's your fault for leaving him behind.
She kept repeating I had no idea this would happen. Contrasting her tearful self-defense, I was filled with anger.
Breaking in like a thief and turning off the breaker, it's a miracle he survived. What if something had happened to Dad?
I couldn't help but blame Amelia, but she shouted back at me in defense.
But it's your fault. It's because of you that James is in this situation.
Her accusations pierced my heart. Indeed, I shouldn't have left James alone. Was it my mistake to leave him, thinking going far would be a burden? The tension in the hospital room was palpable, then suddenly broken.
Be quiet.
James, who was supposed to be sleeping, scolded her sternly. He couldn't raise his voice much due to his illness. Being inherently calm, his outburst surprised us all. All three of us turned to him in unison.
Do you realize what you have done? You've caused trouble for everyone and nearly killed me. Emma is not to blame.
James's eyes were filled with anger and disappointment. His tone was stern, unlike his usual gentle demeanor. Awakened by Amelia's screaming and commotion, he had heard everything, including the surveillance camera discussion.
If you're going to continue making noise, leave. And don't come back to the house ever again.
Scolded harshly, Amelia turned pale and froze, but soon began to cry loudly. which was very disturbing. She apologized to James, but he insisted she leave, and my husband escorted her out of the room. James was discharged just a few days later. When we went to the hospital to pick him up, he greeted us with a smile, seemingly recovered. However, upon returning home, Amelia was waiting at the front door. She hadn't shown up in front of us since that incident. We were expecting an apology, but her words were the same as before.
It's your fault. It's all because of you that James ended up like this.
James and my husband were exasperated. Unwilling to admit fault and still blaming me, James stepped forward.
Be thankful I'm not reporting you to the police because you're family. Your actions are absolutely unforgivable.
His cold voice in the hospital room hadn't changed, and she fell silent. But James didn't stop there. He seemed to despise her from the bottom of his heart.
It's disownment. I can't believe you still don't realize the severity of what you've done. Don't come to our house again. I went to the hospital, but I won't attend your wedding either.
He spoke harshly, pushed Amelia aside, and entered the house vigorously. She was probably not expecting to be disowned by her own father, and stood there in shock. We decided to stand by James and support him. So, we entered the house, leaving her behind. Amelia repeatedly tried to apologize afterwards. But James ignored all her attempts. Having been troubled by her too much, we had no sympathy and upheld his decision. James had been asked to financially support Amelia's wedding and honeymoon, but he refused all requests and declared he wouldn't attend the wedding. One day, Amelia ambushed me outside the house. She desperately apologized and begged me to persuade James, but I had already decided not to forgive her. Knowing she would persist if ignored, I quietly listened to her before leaving her there and walking away. This series of events eventually became known to Amelia's fiancé. James had refused to attend the wedding for safety reasons, which puzzled her fiancé, prompting him to contact James. Unaware of the full story, her fiancé was shocked to hear about the emergency caused by Amelia and hurriedly apologized to James. The fiancé, unlike Amelia, seemed to have reasonable judgment. Calling her actions attempted murder, the wedding was eventually called off. They hadn't moved into their new home yet. But the fiancé canceled it and kicked Amelia out. Having already quit her job and spent her savings on beauty treatments in preparation for the wedding, she was left nearly broke. With the wedding cancellation costs to bear, she fell into debt but didn't show up at our doorstep. Meanwhile, the three of us were living peacefully. Without Amelia's disruptive presence, James's health seemed to be improving. Though we couldn't be complacent due to his age, a care facility seemed unnecessary for now. We were even planning a trip. On the day of the wedding, I got a call. It was Linda, my mother-in-law-to-be, sounding triumphant.
Embarrassing, isn't it? No one's sitting in the groom's family seats. You must regret ignoring me now, huh?
However, her smugness lasted only 20 seconds. I'm Patricia and a 28-year-old office worker. I was born and raised on a wheat farm, brought up on bread. I was an athlete until college, which was fine, but now in my desk job, apparently, I'm eating too many calories from all that bread. Before I knew it, my belly was firmly resting over my pants, and I was shocked when I noticed. This is bad. I decided to start going to the gym after work. That's where I met William, my soon-to-be husband. William was born and raised in Urban, working for a famous company. We often ended up next to each other on the treadmills and became close. 2 years of dating without major fights, and I accepted his proposal without hesitation. I thought we'd be a peaceful married couple. But there was one person who reacted negatively to our marriage. That was his mother, Linda.
What? From a farming family?
When I went to greet the in-laws' house after William's proposal, Linda clearly showed her displeasure. Nice. I love bread. One day, I want to own a field and grow delicious wheat. That's my dream. Unlike her, William's father Anthony was all smiles, sharing his wonderful dream. Dad's born and raised in Boston, so he's got a strong yearning for the countryside. I see. By the way, what's your favorite type of bread, Anthony? Let's see, can I start with the top 10? Please, go ahead. Come on, it'll be tomorrow before you know it. William was smiling wryly, but Anthony looked happy. When asked about his number 1, it was cinnamon rolls. I thought I could get along with Anthony. Linda, isn't it great William found such a wonderful wife? Yes, I suppose. Linda looked me up and down. But I wonder if a girl raised in the peaceful countryside, from a farming family, can fit in with us city folk. I'm worried. Sorry? I was shocked by her sudden rude remark. She continued to look down on me. Listen. Patricia, you're from the countryside, so you might not know, but you should make an appointment when meeting people. Don't just barge in with muddy corn. It's embarrassing. Mom! William looked at her in shock. Anthony was so surprised he froze with his cup in hand. But she didn't stop. Children's education starts before preschool. If they're raised like you were, they'll stick out in the city. Don't embarrass William and us.
Hey, what are you saying?
Anthony, snapping back to reality, hurried to scold Linda. But she just smiled sweetly. I'm just worried as a woman. Can this simple, laid-back girl fit into our family, living in Boston for generations? Wouldn't she be happier returning to the countryside, finding a man more suited to her? Yeah, perhaps. I'd never met someone who could insult a person so elegantly with a smile on their face. Not in the countryside, and I doubt even in the city. William seemed disgusted by his mother's words too.
Mom, you're being incredibly rude to Patricia and her parents. We're just a family born and raised in Boston, nothing special. Also, she's been living in here for 10 years, working hard in an office, so there's nothing to worry about.
We'll see about that. Despite him trying to calm her down gently, Linda just scoffed. When a vein popped on his temple, Anthony clapped his hands loudly. That's enough. I'm sorry, Patricia. Linda's just a worrywart. She doesn't mean any harm. So if you ever have any trouble, always rely on us. We're here to support you as parents. Yes. Anthony's words were comforting. Next to him, Linda was glaring at me with obvious malice though. Worried about the upcoming married life, I hastily swallowed the sigh that almost escaped. I then reported to my parents and started preparing for the wedding. Having many friends who married earlier, I had some ideals like, that ceremony was lovely, or I'd like to try such a performance. However, there were always obstructions. Yes, that was Linda. First, she insisted on coming to see me try on wedding dresses. William tried to refuse, but she ambushed us at the meeting spot and forcefully joined. Every time I tried on a dress, she'd say, "Your bread-like face doesn't suit the dress." What kind of face is that? Then she'd say, "This dress would look better on me, let me try it on." Seriously troubling the coordinators with her absurd comments. At my limit, William had to forcibly remove her from the store, and the day ended with apologies instead of dress fittings. I was utterly down, but I felt sorrier for William, with such an unreasonable mother. Linda didn't just interfere with the wedding dress. She tried to cancel the video filming, saying it was unnecessary for a country girl, and unilaterally inserted her hula dance circle's performance into the program. She even called the venue to change the wedding favors, claiming it was the norm in city weddings to give an unmanageable amount. I was at my breaking point. The wedding preparations I was looking forward to had become nothing but a burden. Causing trouble for the venue, William was also irritated every day. At that rate, we'd both break down. I didn't want to break up with him over it, nor did I want to let Linda have her way. So, I made up my mind to discuss it with William and decided to ignore all of Linda's snide remarks and meddling. Then suddenly, Linda's persistent attacks stopped. Perhaps she got bored because I remained expressionless no matter what she did. Just as I was feeling relieved yet a bit sorry for her, Anthony came to tell me something with a troubled look.
Linda is crying that she's being harassed by Patricia.
So that's her next move. Sighing, I explained the truth to him, with William equally dismayed. Hearing about Linda's antics, his face grew darker.
I'm so sorry. Linda actually proposed to skip the wedding day. I thought that was too much and came to secretly consult with you too. What?
Not only had she filled Anthony with lies, but she'd also planned such an outrageous act.
She said the absence of the groom's parents would be a silent protest on behalf of a son brainwashed by his wife. She's even trying to persuade Margaret and Stephen to skip.
Margaret and Stephen too? William was shocked. Margaret is William's older sister, and Stephen is his younger brother. She must have filled their ears with all sorts of bad things about me. My stomach churned. I understood she didn't like having a country girl as a wife. But didn't she realize how much shame and sorrow this would bring to William?
It's okay, she doesn't have to come.
With a face paler than blue, William murmured,
If she wants to skip, let her. Forcing her to attend won't do any good. What I need to protect is Patricia.
William. I felt like crying at his words. Seeing us like that, Anthony looked down.
I've been with Linda for so many years, I can't let go of my trust in her. But I truly want to support William and Patricia.
Anthony. How can Linda be such a twisted person when she's with these two wonderful people? Honestly, I want to follow William's suggestion and ban Linda, but that would leave a lingering unease in Anthony's heart. After much deliberation, we decided to carry out a plan. If it failed, then Linda was truly beyond redemption. One day of the end of November, it was the wedding day. In the backstage room for family greetings, Linda was nowhere to be seen. Looking at Anthony, he quietly shook his head. It seemed our plan didn't work. He looked sad, yet there was a sense of resolve in his expression. I feel relieved Linda didn't come, although I feel sorry for him. My father Robert led me down the aisle, walking stiffly like a robot. Friends smiling and blessing us. A typical, happy wedding scene. Nothing strange, except for the absence of the groom's mother. The ceremony ended without Linda. Before the reception, I checked my mobile phone in the bridal room and saw a missed call. It was Linda. I invited a person waiting outside the room in, and quietly pressed the redial button. The call connected immediately, and an excited Linda started talking hurriedly.
Oh, Patricia. Aren't you in the middle of the ceremony? Surprising that a bride has the time to answer the phone.
Linda.
Right? You're surprised, aren't you? Confused? Embarrassed with no one sitting in the groom's family seats? Regretting ignoring me now, huh?
Well.
You thought I calmed down, so you're off the hook? Wrong. Neither Anthony, Margaret, Stephen, nor I acknowledge a country girl like you. Everyone hates becoming relatives with a plain girl like you. Serves you right.
She laughed triumphantly, thinking she'd won. What a foolish person. I turned to the person next to me. That's what she says, Anthony.
Hey! Are you listening? Hey!
She stopped talking.
Oh, what did I say? Huh? Anthony? You said you weren't coming today, huh?
She was rattled by the unexpected presence of someone she'd thought wouldn't be there.
No parent would boycott their son's wedding. You're the only one that unreasonable. What? What does that mean? It's only you who's not here, Linda. Huh? Why? You're kidding, right? Patricia doesn't lie like you. Margaret and Stephen are here, wishing for William's happiness. I'm disappointed in you. We'll talk about the future later. Wait! What's happening?
As she floundered, Anthony ended the call, rejecting her.
Patricia, I'm sorry for involving you in this farce even on your wedding day.
I gently stroked Anthony's arm, as if to comfort him. Our plan wasn't anything grand. Anthony wouldn't tell Linda that he knew the truth from us. Until the day before the wedding, he'd pretend to be on Linda's side, encouraging her to change her ways. If she repented by the wedding day, I'd pretend her actions never happened. If she didn't, Anthony would attend without her knowing. That was the whole plan. Until the wedding day, Anthony had hoped she would have a change of heart, but it seemed she'd just made up non-existent grievances and never truly changed. Disgusted by her ugliness, he finally gave up, realizing that involving her in the wedding would be unbelievable. Of course, Margaret and Stephen were fully aware of everything. The wedding, without Linda, ended without major issues in a warm atmosphere. As we were about to return to the dressing room after seeing off the guests with smiles, furious Linda stormed down the hallway with the red carpet.
Just a minute. Patricia.
Oh, look, Madam Boycott.
What?
You're the worst, Mom. Startled by my preemptive strike and William's cold voice, Linda faltered for a moment. But she quickly recovered and clung to William's tuxedo.
No, William, I just wanted your happiness.
Enough, Linda. Hearing her scream, Anthony appeared. Margaret and Stephen also peeked out from behind him.
Anthony! Why? Why are you on Patricia's side? Didn't I tell you what this woman did to me?
I checked everything with William and the others. Linda, you are the one in the wrong.
How come? This is terrible.
She collapsed to the floor, crying like a victim, as William looked down on her with disdain. You brought this on yourself. Good for you, you got to boycott my wedding, just like you wanted.
No, it's not that.
Then what is it?
You know, I wanted to wake you up. Yes. Everyone must have thought it's strange for a groom's mother to be absent. They must have realized there's a problem with the wife.
Yeah, so I explained it to them.
Huh?
That the groom's mother boycotted the wedding because she disapproves of his foreign-born wife.
What?
Everyone felt disgusted and sympathetic towards Patricia.
What the hell?
But it was cool, you know, when he declared, I will absolutely protect my wife.
Wait, just a minute. What do you mean? I'm like the villain here.
Watching a flustered Linda, William sighed in exasperation. Anyone can see that you're the villain, right?
Me?
Yeah, you are. Anthony nodded.
Anthony, why would you say that? It's because of this woman. She's deceived William and now Anthony, making me the outcast.
Still such foolishness. Even the kind Anthony was dismayed by her terrible behavior. She still looked around for an ally. Spotting Margaret, her face brightened.
Margaret! You have children, you understand my feelings, right? You want your children to be happy, right? You should think so too?
Yes.
Right?
That's why I'll warn my children never to marry into a family with trash like you.
Huh?
She was shocked by Margaret's emotionless sarcasm. I'll make sure not to tell you when I get married. I don't want my wife running away. Stephen's tone was light, but his eyes clearly showed contempt.
What are you saying, Stephen? I am your mother, you know.
Yeah. I'm so disappointed. I always respected Mom, and now to find out she's such a terrible person. Exactly. Apologize to Patricia quickly. The relatives blamed on her.
Oh my goodness.
Finally, she seemed to realize she had no allies. Unable to find any words of retaliation, she looked around and stammers. Anthony reached out to take his pitiful wife home, but she flailed and protested.
No. I'm not the bad one.
Hey.
I'm not bad.
Hey, enough already.
Believe me.
Linda cried and screamed like a child. Thinking crying would get her forgiveness, she was really like a child. Of course, no one found it endearing or felt sympathy for a 57-year-old Linda behaving like that. Eventually, she was unceremoniously grabbed by the arms by Anthony and Stephen and dragged away. Is that city manners? It might be. I couldn't help but make a sarcastic comment, to which William responded with a dry laugh. After that, Anthony and Linda separated. Linda was reluctant, but her mother, who learned of her daughter's disgrace at the wedding, tearfully took her back. It was pitiable that Linda's nearly 80-year-old mother had to clean up after her big daughter. Surprisingly, her birthplace was even more remote than my family's home. Apparently, she moved to Boston as a child due to her parents' job transfer. Despite bragging about being from Boston for generations, she probably ran around in the nature until elementary school. Nevertheless, she had the nerve to look down on me as a country bumpkin. Until that incident, she was a good wife and mother, so Anthony gave her a grace period before considering divorce. But seeing Anthony's completely cooled gaze, it's unlikely they'll live together again. Linda, who's always been a housewife with no qualifications, will find it hard to rent a house and work in Boston. She'll probably end up living her remaining years in the countryside she so despised. Half a year later, in early summer.
Whoa! Are you okay?
Anthony spectacularly slipped in my family's wheat farm.
Are you all right? Dear, it's embarrassing being helped by a young person.
Embarrassed, he scratched his cheek with his muddy hand. Hearing his yell, my father and William came rushing over from the next field.
Oh my, you've been training hard.
Come on, Dad. I scolded my father's teasing, but Anthony just laughed it off.
I really need to work on my strength and balance.
City folks for you, Dad. At William's remarked, the four of us broke into laughter. After Memorial Day, bread-loving Anthony had offered to help with weeding. Though machines have reduced the need for manual labor, there are still places that need a human touch. Both Anthony and William handle the seedlings carefully and take on the heavy lifting, much to my parents' gratitude. We ate sandwiches made by my mother, overlooking the fields. The sound of the wind rustling the wheat was soothing.
Wow, such a nice view. I could eat 3 sandwiches just with this scenery. That's nothing, I could eat 10. Don't compete over something like that.
William and Anthony seemed to be enjoying themselves. Watching them, my parents looked happy too, and my heart warmed. Getting married, connecting families, and sharing joy is wonderful. Linda was a regrettable person, but meeting William and becoming family with Anthony is something I'm truly grateful for. Sandwiches under the blue sky with my beloved family. Simple, yet more delicious than any dish I could ask for. You know, I remarried a beautiful and young woman unlike you. My ex-husband Duke said to me with a vulgar smile. It's only been a week since our divorce, and he's already remarried. He probably was cheating on me even while we were married. For a while after we got married, Duke and I were a happy couple. We both loved kids and were conscious about having them right from the start of our marriage.
I can't wait to have kids. I want a daughter and a son,
Duke would say excitedly, imagining our future. But we struggled to conceive. Gradually, our relationship soured, and we ended up hating each other and divorced. A week later, I ran into him at a shopping mall, where I went to distract myself. My name is Lynn. A woman in her 30s and a corporate employee. I met Duke, who's 4 years older than me, through friends. And got married 3 years ago. Duke and I both loved kids and wanted to start a family early. I really hope we have kids soon. I'd like a daughter and a son, Duke used to say.
Yeah, I don't mind the gender as long as they're healthy. But I do want more than 2.
I would respond. We happily talked about what our kids might look like, what their personalities would be like, eagerly awaiting their arrival. However, even after 1 year, then 2, we couldn't conceive. During the first year, Duke said,
It didn't work out again. But no rush, we'll be fine.
But after the second year, he started to become bitter.
What, it didn't work out again? Someone I know had a baby just 2 months after getting married. Why can't we have one?
He complained. I don't know what to say. Our relationship deteriorated from that point. Duke's behavior became harsher, and I couldn't handle it alone anymore. I often confided in my best friend Johanna. Johanna always listened seriously to my problems.
I see. Duke really wants a child, so I understand his disappointment. But he should be more considerate of you,
she said sympathetically. I know. He's changed so much. He used to be so kind, I said, reminiscing about the old Duke and sighing deeply. Johanna and I shared our deepest troubles with each other, things we couldn't tell anyone else. Time passed, and we still couldn't have children. Before we knew it, 3 years of marriage had gone by. Realizing that natural conception might be impossible, I decided to suggest fertility treatments to Duke. After dinner and while drinking coffee, I approached Duke.
Hey, Duke. We haven't had a child in 3 years, right? I'm 34 now, so maybe it's time to consider fertility treatments?
Duke's face showed blatant annoyance at my words.
Fertility treatments? Isn't it because you're getting old and decrepit that we can't have kids? If you're gonna do it alone. That's not something you can just say.
I was taken aback by his harsh response and was at a loss for words.
I'm not doing it. There's no way the problem is with me.
Duke spat out those words and immediately left for the bedroom. Left alone, I stood there stunned. Does Duke not want to cooperate at all? I muttered, filled with a mix of emptiness and sadness. With no other choice, I decided to visit a fertility clinic alone. After a thorough examination.
Where's your husband? It's important to have his cooperation. Infertility issues are often on the male side. Make sure he comes with you next time.
The doctor asked. Encouraged by the doctor's words, I tried to discuss fertility treatments with Duke again that night.
Fertility treatments won't work if it's just me. You need to get tested too. Can you please come to the hospital with me? Are you saying it's my fault? It's obviously you, the woman, who's the problem. I have nothing to do with it. I told you to do it alone if you're going to do it. Don't drag me into this.
Duke exploded in anger.
But infertility often lies on the male side. If the doctor said so, it must be true. The doctor also said that the husband needs to cooperate.
Please, Duke, come to the hospital with me. I tried desperately to persuade Duke. Despite his irritation. Fine, I'll go.
Just stop nagging.
Duke eventually agreed, albeit grudgingly. A few days later, I took Duke to the fertility clinic. After his examination, Duke emerged from the testing room looking irritated, his face twisted in frustration. We were waiting in the reception area to hear both my previous results and Duke's recent test. Due to the clinic's busy schedule, we were not called for a while. Being impatient, Duke abruptly stood up and said, "I'm leaving." He ignored my attempts to stop him and left alone. I had no choice but to hear the results alone. Finally called in, the doctor's revelation left me in shock.
I need to tell Duke.
I rushed home, opened the door, and said, "I'm back." I washed my hands and headed to the living room, where an infuriated Duke awaited.
What's wrong? Hey! What are you playing at? I thought infertility testing would be simpler, but why did I have to go through that? It was humiliating.
It seemed Duke was upset about the nature of the male fertility test.
Well, we need to do proper tests to find out why we can't have kids. About the test results.
Duke cut me off mid-sentence, shouting angrily.
This is all because you're old and can't have kids. I can't take this anymore. I'm divorcing you. What are you talking about all of a sudden?
I was shocked by Duke's sudden declaration of divorce and raised my voice in surprise.
I can't live with an infertile old woman anymore.
Fed up with Duke's abusive language and constant belittling about my infertility, I felt my feelings for him cooled in that moment. Fine. Let's divorce.
Ha, I'm glad you agree so easily. Get out, you infertile old woman.
I silently packed my things and left the house. I decided to stay at my parents' house for a while. They welcomed me warmly, which I was very grateful for. I filled out my part of the divorce papers as soon as I got there and sent them to Duke. We had been married for 3 years. Duke was a kind and good husband in the beginning. There were many happy memories. But the Duke I loved was no longer there. Remembering the ugly face of Duke, who insulted and pushed for divorce, filled me with sadness and intense anger. I didn't have any love left for Duke. A week later, I went to a large shopping mall for a change of scenery. That's when I saw a familiar profile. Ugh. And I involuntarily muttered, I tried to leave unnoticed, but Duke saw me.
Isn't that Lynn?
Duke noticed me and called out. I ignored him and started walking away. Wait. He grabbed my arm. Let go. Duke looked at me with a vile smile.
Following me? Can't forget about me, huh?
What? His off-base comment left me dumbfounded.
I've remarried a beautiful, young woman. I have no need for an infertile old woman, so disappear.
Duke laughed rudely, looking down on me. The fact that he stopped me just to tell me to disappear infuriated me. It had only been a week since our divorce, but he was already remarried. I realized then that Duke must have been cheating on me. The deterioration of our marriage wasn't just because we couldn't have kids, it was also because of Duke's affair. He must have been confident about divorcing because he had the option of remarrying his mistress. What a terrible man. As I frowned, a coquettish voice caught my attention.
Duke, who are you talking to?
The voice belonged to a woman with blonde hair, heavy makeup, and revealing clothes. She was also adorned with designer bags and accessories and held shopping bags from brand stores.
Finished shopping? This is my ex-wife. The infamous ex-wife.
The woman looked down on me with a scornful gaze. I recognized her from somewhere. Who was she? I was on the verge of remembering. When Duke triumphantly introduced her.
Lynn, let me introduce you. This is my wife, Pamela. Beautiful and young, right?
Hi, I'm Pamela, Duke's new wife.
25 years old.
At that moment, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. So, it was that Pamela. Finally remembering, I couldn't stop the laughter that welled up inside me. Seeing me laughing uproariously, Pamela and Duke looked at me with puzzled expressions. Still laughing, I told Duke.
I feel sorry for you. I'm busy, so I'm going now, lol.
Duke hurriedly tried to stop me as I was about to leave.
Hey! What do you mean you feel sorry for me? Is that your way of admitting defeat?
Admitting defeat? No way.
Then what is it?
Spit it out. Duke asked irritably. All right, I'll tell you. I turned to Pamela. I know who you are. I said.
What? I don't know a dull, uninteresting, old woman like you.
Pamela retorted, looking puzzled. What a rude thing to say. I asked Pamela coldly.
Do you know a woman named Johanna?
Johanna? Ah. It seemed she remembered. Pamela's face turned pale.
Johanna? Isn't she Lynn's best friend? What does Pamela have to do with Johanna?
Duke asked anxiously. I declared.
She's the bar employee who tricked Johanna's boyfriend into spending money on her. And she dumped him the moment he ran out of money.
What? Duke's eyes widened in disbelief. I heard from Johanna that her boyfriend had been deceived and spent money on a bar employee named Pamela. Despite the bar explaining it was just part of the job, he believed they were truly in love and bought her expensive bags and designer watches. Johanna decided she didn't need a man who could be deceived by a bar employee. She had shown me a photo of this woman, Pamela. Johanna's naive boyfriend believed Pamela's seductive words, but Pamela went as far as having physical relationships outside the bar and even checking houses to live after they were married. And there were multiple men she did this to.
It wasn't just Johanna's boyfriend. You seem to have manipulated several men, a trade company executive, a small construction company's CEO, and a county administrator, right? But when they started holding back on spending, you cut ties with them.
Duke, aren't you being deceived too?
Are you sure you're okay? That's a lie. There's no way that's true. You're just making up lies because you're bitter, aren't you? Stop kidding around.
Duke was furious, refusing to listen to my warning.
Exactly. I would never do such a thing. I don't even know who Johanna is, and I've never made her boyfriend spend money on me. Everything you're saying is a lie. You're just jealous because I'm beautiful, right?
Pamela confidently lied and shouted back at me.
That's right. Lynn is just jealous of Pamela and making up stories, right? Infertile old hag you are, so ugly. Infertile old hag, that's funny. You're truly pathetic. Go away, you old woman.
Taking advantage of my silence, Pamela and Duke unleashed a barrage of insults at me. Finding the situation ridiculous, I said, "You don't have to believe me. I truly don't care about Duke anymore. Anyway, I wish you happiness." And left the scene. From behind me,
It's all lies, right? Pamela, you're not deceiving me, are you?
followed by Pamela's voice.
Of course, it's a lie. Believe in me. Everything that old woman said was a lie.
I heard. A few days later, I met Johanna and told her about the incident.
Pamela remarried Duke. I was shocked when I heard you divorced Duke, but I never imagined he would marry that woman.
Johanna was visibly surprised, her eyes and mouth wide open. Yes, it's true.
It's a small world, isn't it?
Indeed.
But Duke, he's going to suffer.
Knowing how Duke had treated me, Johanna smiled as if feeling relieved.
I think Duke will end up in a miserable situation. Right now, he's completely infatuated with her.
We laughed together. Sometime later, after work, I was about to head home as usual. Suddenly, "Lynn." I heard a listless voice from behind. I was startled and turned around to see Duke standing there.
What do you want? Don't scare me like that. What are you doing here?
"Lend me some money."
What?
Duke looked much thinner than before, almost haggard, with sunken cheeks and eyes. His wrinkled clothes made him appear pitiful. I could guess the situation from his appearance and request.
So, you're exhausted in every way because of that Pamela.
Exactly.
Just like you said. She just milked me for all I had, and the moment my savings ran out, she left me and filed for divorce.
Just as I had warned, Pamela had married Duke for his money and left him as soon as it ran out. Foolish.
I warned you politely, didn't I? I should have listened carefully to what you said. You know how much I spent on her? She's the worst. Don't you think I'm a victim? I was deceived, I'm the victim here.
What? His claim of being a victim was astonishing. It was all his responsibility.
Because she stripped me of everything, I can't even pay this month's rent, let alone the utilities. I'm sorry to ask, but can you lend me some money for my living expenses? If this continues, I'll become homeless.
Duke's blatant opportunism left me utterly dismayed.
Actually, I want to get back together with you, Lynn. Please reconcile with me. I realized your worth after being deceived by Pamela. Marry me again. It's a lifetime request. Marry me again.
Duke begged tearfully. I looked at him coldly.
Sorry, but I refuse.
What? Why? Why?
Have you forgotten how you treated me? I don't like you at all anymore. I hate you so much I don't even want to see your face. There's no chance of us getting back together.
Duke turned red with rage.
How dare you talk to me like that? I'm offering to reconcile with you, an infertile woman. Be grateful.
Hearing Duke's words, I laughed.
Why are you laughing? I just thought how mistaken you are, LOL.
Mistaken? Duke asked, puzzled.
The infertility issue wasn't with me, it was with you, Duke.
What? Duke was speechless.
You left the hospital without hearing the test results. I was going to tell you that night, but you started talking about divorce and never listened.
The results showed you have almost no fertility, and natural conception is almost impossible. I, on the other hand, had no issues.
That's a lie! It can't be true! There's no way I'm the cause of infertility! It's definitely you!
Duke ranted, refusing to believe.
I've never been sick, so how can I be infertile? It must be you! If you think it's a lie, go to the hospital and hear it yourself.
I replied calmly.
Is it true? No, it can't be. I can't be infertile.
Duke was in total disarray, sweating profusely. He never thought the issue was with him. So, go and hear it directly from the doctor. If you plan to marry someone else in the future, it's better to know about your body, I said and left. Duke went to the clinic and learned the truth about his infertility. He called me several times, but I ignored them all. He then left voicemails.
I was wrong. I'm sorry. Let's start over. Answer the phone. Please. I have no money. I'm in deep debt. Help me, Lynn.
I deleted all his messages and blocked his phone number. A few days after blocking him, I was ambushed by Duke in front of my office.
Lynn, please. Even if we don't reconcile, just lend me some money. I'm not asking for much, just $10,000. No, even $5,000 will do. Please. We were married once, right?
Duke pleaded with deep apologies. Stop this right here. I'm not lending you any money. Go back right now, or I'll call the police. Even as I warned him, Duke persisted.
Just lend me the money.
So, I really called the police to deal with him. Perhaps the shock of the police being called or the fear of increased patrols deterred him. After that, he never showed up in front of me again. Duke, struggling financially and accumulating more debt, moved to a very old apartment and worked part-time at a grocery store late into the night to make ends meet. However, the strain took its toll, and he started making mistakes continuously at work. Unable to handle his main job while doing a side job, he was looked down upon and felt quite uncomfortable. Meanwhile, I've almost completely moved on from the shock of the divorce and am working energetically every day. I had relied quite a bit on my parents, but now I've moved to an apartment near my company and am enjoying living alone without any concerns. Recently, Johanna and I went on a long-planned trip where I met a man and started dating him. It was a long-distance relationship, but last month he got transferred to a branch near my home. He asked me, "Would you like to get married?" So, it looks like I'm going to be quite busy from now on.